Hello everyone and welcome back to the Unexplained Diaries. Here on this channel I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. I noticed it halfway down the street, right after I passed the closed pharmacy. It was late, around 1:30 in the morning. I'd stayed late at work helping a guy named Darren finish inventory, and by the time I left, the buses had already stopped running. I didn't mind the walk. It was about 20 minutes through a mix of quiet residential roads and a couple of empty high streets. The weather was dry but cold, one of those nights where the air feels thin and sharp. Streetlights were spaced out just enough that you were always moving between patches of light and shadow. The buzzing started so faint I thought it was just in my ears, like when you've been somewhere noisy and everything goes quiet after. I slowed down a bit, listening. It didn't go away. It wasn't loud, more like a thin, steady tone sitting just behind everything else. Not mechanical exactly, not like a car engine or anything electrical I could place. I kept walking. The sound stayed with me. Same volume, same pitch. Didn't matter if I turned my head or stopped for a second, it didn't shift. That's when I noticed something else. When I stepped under the next streetlight, it stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Completely gone. I stood there for a second under the light, listening. Nothing. Just the usual quiet, distant hum of the town, maybe a car far off, but no buzzing. I stepped forward, out of the light. As soon as I crossed into the darker stretch, it came back. Same exact tone, same position, like it was right around me. I turned around, walked back under the light. It cut out again instantly. I stood there longer this time, trying to figure it out. Maybe it was something with the lights themselves, some frequency or interference I couldn't hear while standing directly under them. But that didn't make sense because when I stepped just to the edge of the light, where it still reached the pavement, the buzzing came back. It only disappeared when I was fully inside the bright area. I tested it a few more times. Back and forth. Light, quiet, dark, buzzing. Perfectly consistent. I remember standing there thinking it was kind of weird, but not enough to panic. Just something I couldn't explain right away. I kept walking. The next stretch was longer, with fewer lights. The buzzing stayed with me the entire time. Steady, unchanging. After a minute or two, I started noticing how constant it was. It didn't fluctuate with my steps, didn't get louder when I focused on it, didn't fade into the background. It just stayed there, like it was attached to me. I stopped walking. The buzzing didn't stop. I turned slowly in a circle. No change. I looked up. Nothing above me but dark sky and faint stars. I started walking again, a bit faster this time. The buzzing kept pace, same distance, same volume. It didn't lag behind or surge ahead, it just stayed exactly where it had been. The next streetlight came into view. I picked up my pace slightly, heading toward it. The buzzing continued, right up until I stepped fully into the light. Then it cut out. Again. Instantly. I didn't stop this time, just kept walking through the light and out the other side. The moment I left it, the buzzing came back. That's when it started to feel off. Not just strange, off, because it wasn't behaving like something external. It wasn't tied to a location. It wasn't tied to a direction. It was reacting to me, or at least to where I was standing. I checked my phone. No notifications. No audio playing. Battery was fine. Everything normal. I even turned it off completely and put it back in my pocket. The buzzing stayed. I kept moving, heading toward the next lit area. It felt longer between lights now. Or maybe I was just more aware of the distance. The buzzing stayed steady. But I started noticing something else. It wasn't perfectly flat. There was a slight pulse to it. Very subtle. Like it would rise just a fraction, then settle again. Not rhythmic enough to count. Just enough to feel like it was changing slightly over time. I stopped again, listened. The pulse seemed to slow. I started walking. It picked up slightly, not matching my steps exactly, but close enough to notice. That's when I got this weird feeling that it was responding to my movement. Not just following me, adjusting. I didn't like that. I headed straight for the next streetlight. As I stepped into it, the buzzing stopped again. I stood there, breathing a bit heavier now, trying to calm down. Nothing else around me had changed. The street looked the same, houses dark, no cars passing, just me under the light. I stepped out again. The buzzing came back immediately. This time it felt slightly louder. Not by much, just enough that I noticed the difference. I walked faster. The pulse and the sound picked up, not dramatically, but enough to match the increase in pace more closely. I slowed down. The pulse eased. That was the moment I decided to just get home as quickly as possible. I kept moving from one light to the next. Each time I stepped into the bright area, the buzzing stopped. Each time I left it, it returned. Always right there. Always the same distance. Always adjusting slightly with how I moved. By the time I reached my street, I was almost jogging between the lights. The buzzing followed me the whole way. When I got to my front door, I fumbled the key a bit, trying not to look back. I stepped inside, shut the door behind me. The buzzing stopped. Not faded. Stopped. I stood there in the hallway, listening. Nothing. Just the quiet of the house. I waited a minute, then two. Still nothing. I went upstairs, checked the windows. Everything looked normal outside. Street lights on, empty road, no movement. I didn't hear the buzzing again that night. Or the next day. But now, whenever I walk home late, I pay attention to the spaces between the lights. Because that sound didn't feel like it was coming from somewhere out there. It felt like it was staying just outside the places where I could see clearly. I first noticed it when I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. It was late, maybe around 11, and I was sitting just outside my tent. I'd set up camp off a narrow trail in a stretch of woodland about an hour from the nearest town. Nothing extreme, just somewhere quiet I'd been a couple of times before. My name's Callum. I go out alone sometimes when I need the break. No signal out there, no lights, just trees and whatever noise the forest makes at night. That night was calm. No wind, barely any movement in the leaves. You could hear everything. Little cracks from branches settling, insects, the occasional owl further off. Then, there was this low hum. At first, I thought it was something distant, maybe a generator from a farm or a car miles away. It was faint, kind of steady but not perfectly smooth, like a tone that wavered just a bit. I didn't pay much attention to it. I remember just sitting there, poking at the fire, letting it burn down. The sound stayed in the background, easy to ignore. Then it faded out. Not suddenly, just gone. Like someone had turned it down to nothing. I looked up, but there was nothing to see. Just dark trees around me, sky barely visible through the branches. A minute or so passed. Then the sound came back. But this time it felt like it was coming from somewhere else. Before, I'd assumed it was off to my left, deeper into the woods. Now it felt like it was behind me. Not louder, just repositioned. I turned slightly, listening. It didn't get clearer when I faced it, didn't get quieter when I turned away. It just stayed the same. That's when I started paying attention. I stood up, brushed the dirt off my hands, and walked a few steps away from the fire. The hum kept going, low and steady, like something electrical but softer. I tried to pinpoint it, walked a few steps in one direction, stopped, listened. Nothing changed, walked the other way. Same thing. No matter where I stood, it didn't seem any closer or further. It just existed. Then it faded out again, same as before. Slow, smooth, gone. I stood there for a bit, listening to the normal forest sounds return. Everything felt ordinary again. I almost went back to the tent, thinking it was just something carrying weirdly through the trees. But then it came back again. This time it felt like it was above me. That's the only way I can describe it. Not loud, not directional, just over. I looked up through the branches, couldn't see much. The sky was mostly blocked, just small patches of stars between the leaves. Nothing moving, nothing unusual, but the sound stayed. That same low hum, wavering slightly. I felt it more than heard it at that point, not vibrating the ground or anything like that, just this subtle pressure in my ears. I swallowed, tried to clear it, didn't help. The hum kept going. Then, without warning, it shifted again. This time, it felt like it was in front of me. Same distance, same volume, just somewhere else. That's when it stopped feeling like a distant source, because nothing moves like that. Not smoothly, not instantly, not without changing in volume or direction. I backed up toward the fire, more out of instinct than anything. The light from the embers made the trees around me look darker by comparison. The hum stayed. I grabbed my torch and switched it on. Swept it slowly across the trees. Nothing. Just trunks, branches, undergrowth. Normal. But as I moved the beam, I noticed something odd. The sound didn't react, didn't shift with the light, didn't get clearer or duller. It just stayed constant. I lowered the torch. The hum faded out again. I stood there in the quiet, heart beating a bit faster now. It came back a few seconds later. This time it felt like it was further away. Not a specific direction, just less present. Like it had stepped back. I walked a few paces toward where I thought it might be. It didn't change. Still felt distant. Then I stopped, and it felt closer again. Like it had moved. Not me. That's when I went back to the tent. I didn't rush, but I didn't take my time either. Just got inside, zipped it up, and sat there. The hum continued outside, fading in and out. Never staying long enough for me to get used to it. Never disappearing long enough for me to forget it. At one point, it sounded like it was right next to the tent. Not louder, just present. Like it was just beyond the fabric. I held my breath, listening, waiting for something else. A movement, a step, anything. But there was nothing, just the hum. Then it faded again. I checked my phone, no signal. Time looked normal, nothing unusual there. I lay back, staring at the inside of the tent. The hum came and went, each time from a different place, above, behind, somewhere off to the side. Never consistent, never trackable. At some point, I must have drifted off. Because when I woke up, it was light, quiet, no hum. Just birds and wind in the trees. Everything normal. I stepped outside. The campsite looked exactly how I'd left it. No signs of anything, no disturbed ground, nothing out of place. But the air felt lighter, like that pressure from the night before was gone. I packed up and left not long after. Didn't stick around. The whole drive back, I kept thinking about how the sound moved. Not like something traveling, not like it was passing through, more like it was just appearing in different places without crossing the space in between. I haven't been back to that spot since, not because I think something's out there, just because I don't think I'd hear it the same way again. And I'm not sure I want to. I saw it for maybe half a second, but it didn't feel like something you just miss-see. I was driving home late, just after 2 a.m., coming back from a job site. I do maintenance work for commercial properties, and sometimes the hours run late if something breaks overnight. My name's Jordan. I've done enough late drives that empty roads don't bother me anymore. That night was dry, no rain, clear sky, just dark. I was on a long stretch of road that cuts between open land. No streetlights for a few miles. Just my headlights and whatever the sky gave me. The road ahead was flat, straight, nothing in front of me. Then the light hit it. It wasn't like I saw something first, and then the light caught it. It was the reflection that came first. A quick flash, like my headlights bounced off something smooth. But it wasn't on the road, it was above it. Maybe 10, 15 feet up. I didn't even have time to process it properly. The shape, if you could call it that, looked curved. Not flat like a sign or a branch, more like a surface, rounded, smooth, almost like the side of something. It caught the light for a split second, just enough to show a pale, dull reflection. Then it was gone. No movement away, no fading, just not there anymore. I hit the brakes without thinking, not hard, just enough to slow down. My eyes stayed locked on that spot. The road ahead was empty again, no sign of anything. No object falling, no shadow moving, nothing. I rolled forward slowly, heart beating a bit faster now, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. My first thought was a bird, but it didn't move like one, didn't flap, didn't dart away, and it had looked too smooth, too uniform. I kept driving, slower now, watching the road and the air above it more carefully. Nothing else happened for a while, just the usual darkness, fields stretching out on both sides, occasional fence posts flashing by. Then I noticed something else. The air ahead of the car looked slightly off. Not fog, not mist, just different. Like the darkness wasn't as solid. I blinked a couple of times, trying to clear my eyes, but it stayed, a faint distortion, hard to focus on, like looking at heat rising off asphalt in the summer. Except it was cold out, and there was no source for it. I eased off the accelerator even more. The distortion didn't move. It stayed fixed ahead of me. Then, as I got closer, it shifted. Not sideways, not up or down, just adjusted. Like it wasn't in one place, but in relation to me. That made my stomach drop a bit. I slowed almost to a crawl. The headlights pushed into that space. For a second, the beam looked uneven, like it bent slightly around something. Not dramatically, just enough that it didn't look like a straight cone of light anymore. Then it snapped back to normal. The distortion vanished, just like the reflection had earlier. I stopped the car completely, sat there in the middle of the road, engine idling, lights on, looking straight ahead, nothing. I checked the mirrors, empty road behind me, no other cars, no movement. I opened the window slightly. Cold air rushed in. No unusual sounds, no hum, no wind beyond the usual. Just silence. I stepped out of the car, stood beside it, looking up and down the road. The sky was clear, stars visible, no clouds, no aircraft, nothing. I walked a few steps forward, toward where I thought I'd seen it. The road surface looked normal. No marks, no debris, nothing out of place. I looked up again, half expecting to see something hovering there, but there was nothing, just empty air. I stood there for a minute or two, listening, waiting. Nothing changed. Eventually, I got back in the car, closed the door, sat there for a moment longer before starting to move again. As I drove, I kept my eyes moving between the road and the space above it. Nothing else appeared, no reflections, no distortions. Everything stayed normal. But the whole time, I had this feeling that whatever I'd seen, it hadn't moved away. It had just stopped being visible. By the time I reached the next lit area with actual streetlights and buildings, I'd almost convinced myself it was something explainable, a trick of the light, something in the air. But it didn't feel like that, because the reflection had been too clean, too defined. And it had come from something solid enough to catch the light, even if I couldn't see it clearly. Now, whenever I drive that stretch at night, I watch the space above the road just as much as the road itself. Because for that brief moment, there was something there, and it didn't behave like anything I've ever seen before. I woke up because of the light. Not bright, just enough to catch my eyes through my eyelids. I thought it was morning at first, like sunlight slipping through the curtains, but it felt wrong, too focused. I opened my eyes. My phone was sitting upright at the edge of the bed, screen facing me. That's what didn't make sense right away. I don't leave it there. I always put it on the nightstand, face down, same spot every night. It's just habit. But now it was balanced on its bottom edge, angled slightly toward me, like someone had propped it there. The screen was on, but not in any normal way. No lock screen, no notifications, just a dim, pale glow, almost gray. I blinked a couple times, trying to wake up properly. The room was still dark. Early morning, maybe just before sunrise. The curtains were closed, and the only light was coming from the phone. I reached for it. As soon as I touched it, the screen went black, just shut off. I stared at it for a second, still holding it in my hand. Then I pressed the power button. Nothing. Pressed it again. Still nothing. I frowned and sat up. My name's Lewis. I live alone in a small flat above a shop. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with thin walls and a street-facing window. You hear everything from outside, even late at night. But right then, it felt quiet. Too quiet. I pressed the power button again, holding it longer this time. Finally, the screen lit up. Battery. 2%. That stopped me. I'd charged it before going to bed. I remembered plugging it in. I always do, because the battery's been a bit unreliable lately. I looked toward the nightstand. The charging cable was still there, unplugged, just lying on the table. I leaned over and checked the socket. Still switched on. I looked back at the phone. 2%. I unlocked it. No apps open, no recent activity. I checked the battery usage. Nothing unusual, no app draining it. Just a steady drop over time, like it had been sitting idle. I frowned. That didn't make sense. I checked the time. 5:17 a.m. I knew I hadn't been up at that hour. I'm a heavy sleeper. Once I'm out, and I had no memory of waking up during the night. I scrolled through the app switcher, nothing there, no browser open, no videos, no messages. I checked my call log, empty. No outgoing calls, no missed calls, no notifications. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then. Subtle, like when you change altitude quickly. I swallowed. It stayed. I looked around the room. Everything was where it should be. Clothes on the chair, shoes by the door, curtains still closed, no sign anything had been moved. Except the phone. I picked it up again and turned it over in my hand. It felt slightly warm. Not hot, just warmer than it should have been after sitting idle. I stood up and walked over to the nightstand, plugged the charger back in, connected the phone. The charging icon appeared immediately. Normal, like nothing had happened. I stood there for a bit, listening. The usual early morning sounds were missing. No distant traffic, no footsteps from downstairs, just a low, almost imperceptible hum. I froze. It wasn't coming from outside, it wasn't coming from the walls. It felt internal. Not in my head exactly, but close, like the sound was right behind my ears. I turned my head slightly. The hum didn't change direction, didn't get louder or quieter, just stayed constant. I stepped toward the window, the hum stayed with me. Same level, same tone. I pulled the curtain back slightly. The street outside looked normal, empty. No movement, no cars. The sky was just starting to lighten. I let the curtain fall back. The hum faded slightly. Not gone, just quieter. I stepped toward the door. It faded a bit more. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. It stopped. Completely. I stood there, listening. Nothing. Just the normal quiet of the building. I stepped back into the flat. The hum returned. Same low tone, same position. I closed the door behind me. The pressure in my ears deepened slightly. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to understand it. Then I went back to the bedroom. The phone was still on the nightstand. Charging. Screen dark. I picked it up again, unlocked it. Still nothing. No sign it had been used. No evidence of anything. I checked the time again. 5:22. 5 minutes had passed. It didn't feel like 5 minutes. I sat down on the bed, looking at the spot where the phone had been, right at the edge, perfectly balanced, like it had been placed there deliberately. I tried to picture myself doing that, waking up in the middle of the night, unplugging the charger, setting the phone upright, staring at it. But there was nothing, no memory, no feeling of having been awake. Just a blank space between going to sleep and waking up. The hum stayed for a while. Faint, constant, then slowly faded. I didn't notice exactly when it stopped, just that at some point it wasn't there anymore. The pressure in my ears eased, the normal sounds returned, a car passing outside, a door closing downstairs, everything back to how it should be. I didn't go back to sleep, just sat there until the room filled with daylight, watching the phone, waiting to see if it would turn on again by itself. It didn't. But now, every morning when I wake up, I check where it is before I even look at the time, just to make sure it hasn't moved somewhere I didn't leave it. I noticed it because the headlights didn't pass through it cleanly. I was driving home on a long stretch of road that cuts between open fields. No streetlights, just fences and low grass on either side. It was one of those roads where everything outside the beam just disappears into black. It was late, maybe around 12:40 a.m. Clear sky, no fog, no rain, just darkness. I'd been driving steady for a while, nothing unusual. The radio was off, just the sound of the tires and the engine, that constant low hum you stop noticing after a while. Then something moved in the headlights, not something solid. At first I thought it was just dust or insects catching the beam, but it didn't look like that. It had shape, not a defined one, more like an outline. Faint, like a distortion in the air itself. It drifted across the road from left to right, about 20 feet ahead of me. The headlights hit it, and for a second, the light bent. That's the only way I can describe it, like it passed through something that changed how it spread. Then it was gone. No fade, no movement, away, just gone. I slowed slightly without thinking, eyes fixed on the stretch of road ahead. Nothing else there, the road normally. I told myself it was probably something simple. Heat distortion, even though it wasn't warm enough for that, or maybe something kicked up from the side of the road. But it hadn't looked like dust. It had looked contained. I kept driving, a little slower now, watching the road more carefully. The fields on either side stayed dark. No movement, no animals, nothing. A few seconds passed, then I saw it again. Same thing, slightly further ahead this time. A faint, transparent shape drifting across the road. The headlights bent through it again, subtle, but clear enough that I couldn't ignore it. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then, like the air inside the car had shifted. I swallowed. It didn't go away. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. The car felt steady, normal. I checked the mirrors briefly, nothing behind me, no other cars. I looked forward again. The road stretched out into the dark. I kept driving, slower still. The engine noise felt muted somehow, like the sound wasn't filling the space the way it should. Then the headlights flickered slightly, not off, just a brief dip. Then back. I frowned and glanced at the dashboard. No warning lights. Everything looked fine. I looked back up. Nothing in the road, just empty space. I exhaled slowly, tried to steady myself. Then it happened again. Closer this time. The distortion appeared just a few feet ahead of the car. I saw it clearly, not a shape, not really. More like a section of air that didn't line up with the rest, edges that didn't match, light bending through it at the wrong angle. It drifted across the lane. Slow, unhurried. I tapped the brakes lightly. The car slowed almost to a crawl. The distortion passed directly through the beam. For a split second, the road behind it looked warped, like it had been stretched sideways. Then it disappeared. I stopped the car, right there in the middle of the road, engine idling. Lights still on. I stared ahead, waiting. Nothing. The pressure in my ears deepened slightly. The silence around me felt heavier, like the world outside had pulled back. I cracked the window open slightly. The air outside felt still. No wind, no sound. I listened. Nothing. I closed the window again, looked forward, and then I saw something I hadn't noticed before, further down the road, barely visible, a faint shimmer, not moving this time, just there, like the air ahead wasn't uniform. I squinted, trying to get a better look. The headlights didn't reach far enough to define it clearly, but I could see the distortion. A subtle difference in how the light spread. I hesitated, then pressed the accelerator gently. The car moved forward, slow. The shimmer stayed in place. I kept my eyes locked on it. The pressure in my ears increased. I swallowed again. Still there. The closer I got, the more defined it became. Not a shape, just a section of space that didn't behave like the rest. The light bent through it differently. I slowed again, almost stopping. The shimmer drifted slightly, just enough to confirm it wasn't fixed. It moved across the road, same direction as before, left to right. I stopped the car again, watched it pass. The headlights warped around it for a second. Then it was gone. The road ahead looked normal. The pressure in my ears eased slightly. The silence lifted just a bit. I sat there for a few seconds, trying to decide what to do. Then I drove. Didn't stop again. Just kept moving. The rest of the road was clear. No more distortions. No flickers. Nothing. I reached the main road a few minutes later. Streetlights came back. Other cars. Normal sound. Everything felt right again. I checked the time on the dashboard. 12:52. That didn't feel right. It felt like more time had passed, or less. I couldn't tell. I got home and sat in the driveway for a minute. Engine off, lights off, just sitting there, looking through the windshield. Nothing unusual. Everything's still. But now, whenever I drive that road at night, I find myself watching the space just ahead of the headlights. Not for something solid, but for anything that bends the light the wrong way for even a second. I noticed it because it matched my pace. I was out later than usual, just walking loops around the estate because I couldn't settle. It was one of those nights where everything feels off, for no clear reason. Not cold, not warm, no wind, just still. My name's Aaron. I live on the edge of a suburban area that backs onto a stretch of open green space. There's a path that cuts behind a row of houses and then loops around a small field before coming back toward the main road. I'd done that loop 100 times. That night, I had my hands in my pockets, hood up, just walking slow. No music, no phone out, just the sound of my steps on the pavement. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was my own footsteps echoing weirdly, a soft, dull sound. Not quite a thud, more like a low pulse. It repeated every second or so. I slowed down slightly. The sound didn't change. Still steady. I stopped walking. The sound stopped too, not faded, stopped. Completely. I stood there for a second, listening. Nothing. No wind, no distant cars, just quiet. I took a step forward again. The sound came back. Soft, rhythmic, above me. I tilted my head up. The sky was clear. No clouds, just a few stars and the faint glow from the town. Nothing moving, nothing visible. I kept walking. The sound kept pace. I paid closer attention now. It wasn't loud, barely noticeable unless you were listening for it, but it was there, a low, pulsing beat. I sped up slightly. Just a natural reaction. The sound sped up too. Not by a lot, but enough that it matched the rhythm of my steps. I stopped again. Silence. I looked around. The houses nearby were dark. A couple of windows lit further down, but nothing close. No one else out. I felt that slight pressure in my ears then, like when you go up a hill too fast. I swallowed. It stayed. I stepped forward again. The sound returned. I kept my pace steady this time. The sound followed it exactly. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was something environmental, something echoing weirdly between the houses. But there was nothing above me to reflect sound. No trees, no overhangs, just open space. I moved off the pavement and onto the grass, cutting toward the open field. The ground softened under my shoes. The sound didn't change. Still above me, still matching. I stopped in the middle of the field, looked straight up. Nothing. The stars looked normal. No movement, no lights, no shapes, just empty sky. The pressure in my ears increased slightly, not painful, just noticeable. I turned slowly in place. The sound didn't shift direction. It stayed directly above me, centered. I took a few steps forward again. The sound followed, same rhythm, same position. I tried walking faster. The sound sped up again, matched me perfectly. That's when it started to feel wrong. Not just strange, wrong. Like something was responding to me in real time. I slowed down. The sound slowed. I stopped. Silence. I stood there for a while, breathing slowly, trying to figure out what to do. Then I started walking back toward the path. The sound returned immediately. Matching me again, I didn't look up this time, just kept my eyes on the ground ahead. The pressure in my ears stayed. The air felt heavier, like the space around me had thickened slightly. I reached the path again, stepped onto the pavement. The sound didn't change. Still above, still tracking. I picked up my pace, not running, just walking faster. The sound sped up, closer together now, the rhythm tighter. I felt my chest tighten slightly, not from exertion, just from that growing sense that I wasn't alone out there, even though I couldn't see anything. I glanced up again, quickly, still nothing, no light, no movement, just the same empty sky. I looked back down and kept moving. The houses came closer, street lights ahead. I focused on that, kept walking. The sound stayed with me, matching every step, until I reached the first street light. As soon as I stepped into the light, it stopped. Instantly. No fade, no delay, just gone. I froze, stood there under the light, listening. Nothing. The pressure in my ears eased slightly. I took another step forward. No sound. Another. Still nothing. I stepped back into the darker part of the path behind me. The sound came back, soft, pulsing, matching my movement again. I stepped forward into the light. Silence. I tested it a few times. Back into the dark, sound. Into the light, nothing. Each time. Exactly the same. I stayed in the lit area after that. Walked the rest of the way home under the streetlights. No sound followed me there. Everything felt normal again. The pressure in my ears faded completely. When I got home, I stood outside for a minute before going in. Looked up at the sky one last time. Nothing unusual, just the same empty stretch of stars. But now, when I walk that path at night, I don't stay in the dark parts anymore. I keep to the light, because I don't know what was keeping pace with me up there, but it only seemed to follow when I couldn't see it. I noticed it because the water wasn't moving around it. I was out alone about half an hour before full dark, standing on a narrow wooden dock that juts out into a small lake. It's not a big place, just one of those quiet spots locals know about. Surrounded by trees, no houses nearby, no lights except what you bring with you. My name's Nathan. I'd gone there to clear my head more than anything. Brought a rod, a small tackle box, nothing fancy. The water was calm, not perfectly flat, but close enough. Just small ripples from the occasional breeze, nothing strong. I'd been casting out in the same spot for a while, reeling in slow, not expecting much. That's when I saw it. A faint glow under the surface. At first, I thought it was just a reflection, something catching the last bit of light from the sky. But it wasn't moving with the water. That's what caught my attention. The ripples passed over it, around it, but the glow itself stayed completely still, like it was fixed in place beneath the surface. I stopped reeling, just stood there, watching. The glow wasn't bright, barely visible unless you looked directly at it, kind of pale, like a soft, dull light. I leaned forward slightly, trying to get a better angle. The water shifted, the ripples changed, but the glow didn't distort, didn't stretch or break the way a reflection should. It just stayed the same. Same size, same shape. I glanced around the shoreline. Nothing there. No other lights, no houses, no one else fishing. Just me. I looked back down. The glow was still there. About 10 feet out from the dock. Maybe a few feet below the surface. I couldn't judge the depth properly. There was no reference. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then. Subtle. Like when you dive a little too quickly in a pool. I swallowed. It didn't change. I stepped forward on the dock. The wood creaked under my weight. The sound felt louder than it should have. I crouched down near the edge, still watching. The glow didn't react, didn't move, didn't flicker, just stayed there, perfectly still. I picked up my rod and cast slightly past it. The line landed with a soft splash. The ripples spread outward, passed over the glow, but the glow didn't break, didn't shift. It stayed exactly where it was. The line drifted slightly. I started to reel it in, slow. As the lure passed over the spot, nothing happened. Ceased, no disturbance, no change. It just moved through, like there was nothing there, but the glow stayed, unchanged. I felt that tightness in my chest then. Not panic, just a slow, creeping sense that something wasn't right. I reeled the line all the way back in, set the rod down, and just watched. The sky above was getting darker now, the last bit of light fading, the trees around the lake turning into silhouettes. The glow beneath the water stayed the same faint brightness, same stillness. I leaned even closer, trying to see if there was any shape to it, but there wasn't. Not really, just a concentrated patch of light. Edges soft, but defined, like it had boundaries. I reached out with my hand, not touching the water, just hovering above it. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. The glow didn't change, didn't react. I lowered my hand closer. Still nothing. Then I stopped. Something about it didn't feel right to touch. I pulled my hand back, sat down on the edge of the dock instead, feet dangling just above the surface. The pressure in my ears deepened slightly. The air felt heavier, like it had thickened around me. I looked out across the lake. Everything else was normal. Dark water, still surface, faint outline of trees. I looked back down. The glow hadn't moved, but it had dimmed, just slightly. I leaned forward again, watching closely. The glow continued to fade, not shrinking, not moving, just losing brightness, slowly, evenly, like someone was turning it down. The water above it stayed calm. No bubbles, no disturbance, no sign anything was rising. It just stayed beneath the surface, fading. The pressure in my ear started to ease, gradually. The air felt lighter. The normal sounds of the lake began to return. A faint rustle in the trees, something moving in the distance. I didn't take my eyes off the water. The glow was barely visible now, just a faint suggestion of light. Then, it was gone. No flicker, no movement, just gone. The water looked normal again, dark, still, empty. I sat there for a few seconds, staring at the spot, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. I picked up my rod again, cast into the same area. The line landed. The ripples spread, no glow beneath, no change, just water. I stayed there until it got too dark to see properly. Packed up slowly, kept looking back at that spot, half expecting the light to come back. It didn't. When I got home, I rinsed my gear like I always do. Everything felt normal. But now, whenever I'm out there, I don't just watch the surface. I keep looking beneath it, just in case something decides to sit perfectly still again, where the water moves around it, but it doesn't move at all. I noticed it because it didn't blink like the others. I was out behind the cabin, lying on one of those cheap folding chairs with my hands behind my head, just looking up. No phone, no music, nothing. It was one of the few places I knew where you could still see a proper sky without much light pollution. My cousin Mark had let me use the place for a few nights. It sits near the edge of a forest, with a clearing that opens out toward a lake you can't quite see from the cabin, but you can hear it at night if the wind's right. That night, the air was still, not cold, just cool enough that you could sit outside without thinking about it. I'd been out there maybe 20 minutes, just picking out constellations, half remembering names I hadn't thought about in years. Everything felt normal, quiet. Then one of the stars dimmed, not blinked, not flickered. It just dipped, slightly, like something had passed in front of it. I narrowed my eyes, trying to focus on the exact spot. There was nothing else there. No cloud, no movement. The star stayed visible, just a little less bright than it had been a second ago. Then it brightened again, back to exactly how it was before. I waited, watching that same spot. Nothing else happened. I exhaled slowly and shifted in the chair. Told myself it was probably just my eyes adjusting, or something small drifting high up that I couldn't see. I kept looking. A few minutes passed, then it happened again. Same star, same dimming, same smooth change, like something invisible had moved across it, then back to normal. I sat up slightly, resting on my elbows now, more focused. The rest of the sky stayed completely still. No streaks, no flashes, no movement anywhere else. Just that one star. I picked a second star nearby and watched both of them, waiting. The second one stayed steady. The first one dimmed again. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then. Subtle, like when you're driving up a hill. I swallowed. It didn't clear. I sat up fully, feet on the ground, still looking up. The dimming didn't happen on a set pattern, not evenly spaced. Just every so often. Irregular, but always the same star. I stood up slowly. The chair creaked slightly behind me. The sound felt louder than it should have. The rest of the clearing was silent. No wind in the trees, no insects, just that quiet. I stepped a few feet forward, closer to the edge of the clearing, still looking up. The star dimmed again, and this time I thought I saw something. Not clearly, just a faint shift around it, like the space near it had changed. For a split second, then gone. I rubbed my eyes, looked again, nothing there. The star was steady. I took another step forward. The pressure in my ears deepened slightly. Not painful, just there, constant. I kept my eyes locked on that part of the sky, waiting. The star dimmed again, and this time I was sure. There was something, not a shape, not a solid object. More like a faint distortion, a slight warping of the space around it. It moved across the star, then disappeared. The star returned to full brightness. I felt that tightness in my chest then. Not panic, just that creeping sense that something wasn't right. I turned slightly, scanning the rest of the sky. Nothing else looked off. Everything else stayed steady. Only that one point. I looked back. The star dimmed again, and again that same faint distortion passed over it. Same direction, same speed. Too smooth, too controlled. I stepped back slowly. The ground felt uneven under my feet. I hadn't realized how far I'd walked from the chair. The cabin was behind me, lights off. Dark. The forest beyond it even darker. I looked up again. The star dimmed. The distortion passed. But this time it didn't stop there. I saw it continue. Faint. Almost impossible to track, but moving. Across the sky, not fast, just steady. I followed it with my eyes. It didn't block other stars completely, just dimmed them slightly as it passed, like it was bending the light. I turned slowly, keeping it in view. The pressure in my ears increased. The air felt heavier, like something was pressing down gently. I took a step back toward the cabin. The distortion kept moving, same path, same speed. Then it stopped. Not gradually, just stopped. Midway across the sky, I held my breath. Waiting. It stayed there for a second, maybe two. Then it shifted, not moved, shifted, like it had snapped to a new position, further to the right. Instantly, I blinked, tried to refocus. It was already moving again. Same slow pace, same faint warping. I felt my hands tense at my sides. I didn't want to lose track of it, but it was hard to hold on to. Too faint, too subtle. Then it faded, not disappearing all at once, just becoming less noticeable. Until the stars behind it looked normal again, like it had never been there. I stood there for a few seconds, looking at the empty sky. The pressure in my ears eased. The air felt lighter. The usual night sounds started to return. A faint rustle in the trees. Something moving far off near the lake, everything settling back into place. I looked back at the original star. It stayed steady now. No dimming, no change, just like all the others. I stayed outside for a while longer, watching, waiting. Nothing else happened. Eventually, I went back inside, closed the door, sat there in the quiet, trying to make sense of it. But now, whenever I look up at the sky, I don't just look for things that move. I watch the stars themselves, just to see if any of them dim for a second, like something passed in front of them that I'm not supposed to see. I noticed it because the light didn't match anything in the room. I was lying on my back, not asleep yet, just staring at the ceiling the way you do when you're too tired to scroll on your phone, but not tired enough to drift off. The room was dark except for a faint glow coming in through the curtains. My name's Callum. I live in a second-floor flat in a pretty quiet part of town. The street outside has one lamppost that throws a dull orange light, but it usually stays in one place, just a soft glow through the fabric of the curtains. That night, the light in the room looked normal at first, just a faint patch near the window side. I wasn't really paying attention. Then it shifted, not flickered, not brightened, it moved, slowly across the ceiling. I frowned slightly, still lying there, watching it. The light was faint, but it had a clear edge, like a soft rectangle or oval, and it was sliding across the ceiling toward the center of the room. I pushed myself up onto my elbows, looking around. The curtains hadn't moved. No wind, no cars passing outside, nothing that should have changed the angle of light. I glanced at the wall near the window. The glow there stayed the same. It wasn't coming from outside the way it normally would. I looked back at the ceiling. The light kept moving. Same slow pace. Steady. No shaking. No flicker. Just a smooth glide. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then. Subtle. Like when you're going up in an elevator. I swallowed. It didn't clear. I sat up fully now, back against the headboard, watching it more carefully. The edges of the light were too clean. Not sharp, but defined. Cleaner than anything filtered through curtains should look. It reached the middle of the ceiling and paused, not abruptly, just stopped. I held my breath without realizing. The room felt quieter. The usual faint sounds, pipes, distant movement in other flats felt reduced, like something had dampened them. I glanced toward the door. Closed. No movement. I looked back up. The light hadn't changed. Still sitting there, centered above me. I raised my hand slightly, almost without thinking, held it up toward the ceiling. The light didn't react, didn't change brightness, didn't cast any noticeable shadow from my hand. It just stayed. I felt that tightness in my chest then. Not panic, just that creeping awareness that something wasn't right. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, stood up slowly. The floor felt normal under my feet. The room didn't feel warmer or colder. Just that pressure in my ears. And that quiet. I took a step forward, looking up the entire time. The light stayed fixed, exactly where it had stopped. Then it moved again. This time in a different direction, not back toward the window, toward the far corner of the ceiling, the side opposite the window. It slid across slowly, same steady pace, same clean edges. I turned slightly to follow it. The rest of the room stayed dark. No other light sources changed. No cars passed. No shadows shifted anywhere else. Just that one patch moving. I reached the middle of the room, stopped, watching. The light continued its path, heading toward the far corner. The pressure in my ears increased slightly. I swallowed again, still there. The silence felt heavier now. Like the space around me had tightened, the light reached the corner, paused again, then began to fade. Not outward, not spreading, just dimming. Evenly, like someone lowering a brightness slider. I leaned forward slightly, trying to keep it in view. The edges softened. The brightness dropped until it was barely visible. Gone. The ceiling returned to its normal dimness. The faint glow from the window stayed where it always was, unchanged. I stood there for a few seconds, looking at the empty corner, waiting. Nothing happened. The pressure in my ears eased. The normal background sounds returned. Pipes, a faint creak from somewhere. Everything back to how it should be. I checked the time on my phone, 1:09 a.m. I remember that clearly. I looked back up at the ceiling. Nothing unusual, no sign anything had been there. I walked over to the window, pulled the curtain back slightly. The street outside looked normal. Lamppost still in the same position, light falling exactly where it always does. I let the curtain fall back, stood there for a moment, then went back to bed, lay down again, staring at the ceiling, waiting to see if it would happen again. It didn't. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, everything looked normal. No marks, no signs of anything. But now, when I lie in bed at night, I don't just stare at the ceiling out of habit. I watch it. Just to see if any part of it starts moving when it shouldn't. I noticed it because it didn't light the ground. I was driving back from a late shift, cutting through a stretch of farmland I'd used 100 times before. It's a straight road for a few miles, nothing on either side except fields and the occasional fence line. No streetlights out there, just your headlights and whatever's in the sky. It was around 1:30 in the morning. Clear night. No fog, no rain. I had the window cracked slightly, just enough to let in some cool air. The road was empty. No cars ahead, none behind. I wasn't really thinking about anything, just driving. Then I saw the glow. Off to the right, maybe 30 or 40 feet from the road, just above the ground. At first I thought it was a reflection, something catching the headlights at an angle. But it wasn't. It was too steady. A faint, pale light. Not bright. More like a soft haze. And it wasn't lighting anything around it. That's what caught my attention. The grass beneath it stayed dark. No shadow, no spread, just the glow itself. I slowed down slightly, eyes fixed on it. The glow moved, not forward, sideways, parallel to the road, smooth, no jerking or wobbling, just a steady glide. I leaned forward a bit, trying to get a better look. The headlights hit it more directly for a second, and the light didn't reflect. It just passed through, or around it. I couldn't tell. The glow stayed the same brightness, same shape, like it existed separately from everything else. I slowed down more, almost to a crawl. The glow kept pace for a second, then drifted slightly ahead, still moving sideways, still not touching the ground with its light. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then, subtle, like the start of a headache, but deeper. I swallowed. It didn't change. I glanced at the dashboard, everything normal. No warnings. I looked back at the glow. It was closer to the road now, still just off the shoulder, moving steadily. I rolled the window down a bit more, listened. Nothing, no sound from it, no hum, no movement in the grass. Just silence. The air felt thicker somehow, like it wasn't moving the way it should. I eased the car forward, trying to keep it in view. The glow drifted closer still. Now maybe 10 feet from the edge of the road, I could see it more clearly. It wasn't a solid shape, more like a concentrated patch of dim light. Edges soft but defined, like it had a boundary it didn't cross. I tapped the brakes, the car slowed almost to a stop. The glow didn't stop. It kept moving sideways, crossing the line of my headlights. For a moment it was directly in front of the car, and the light bent, not dramatically, but enough that the road behind it looked slightly off, like it had been stretched. Then the glow passed out of the beam, and it was just there again, unchanged. I felt that tightness in my chest then. Not panic, just that creeping awareness that this didn't fit anything I understood. I stayed stopped, watching. The glow continued drifting, now moving away from the road, back toward the open field, still the same steady pace, still not lighting anything. I considered getting out, just for a second, to see it without the glass between us. But the thought didn't sit right. Something about it felt wrong to approach. I stayed in the car, hands on the wheel, watching. The glow moved further out into the field, then it slowed, not abruptly, just gradually, until it was barely moving. It hung there for a second, completely still. Then it dimmed, not fading outward, not shrinking, just losing brightness evenly, until it was barely visible, and then gone. No flicker, no movement away, just gone. I sat there for a few seconds, engine idling, headlights still cutting across the empty field, nothing there. No sign anything had been. The pressure in my ears eased. The air felt normal again. I looked around. The rest of the road was empty. Fields stretched out on both sides, unchanged. I checked the time, 1:42. That didn't feel right. It felt like less time had passed, or more. I couldn't tell. I drove the rest of the way home without stopping. Didn't see anything else. No more lights, no movement. Just the usual empty road. When I got home, I sat in the driveway for a minute, looking out over the street. Everything normal. Streetlights casting their usual glow. Cars parked where they always are. But now, whenever I drive that stretch at night, I don't just watch the road. I keep checking the fields, looking for anything that moves without lighting the ground beneath it. I noticed it because the fence didn't line up anymore. I was checking the footage on my phone while sitting at the kitchen table, just going through the usual overnight recordings. Nothing exciting ever happens here, but I got into the habit after a package went missing a few months back. My name's Darren. I live in a small, semi-detached house on the edge of a quiet estate. The camera points out over the driveway and a bit of the street, with my fence running along the right side of the frame. Everything looked normal at first. The street empty. My car parked in the usual spot, the fence straight, the way it always is. I scrubbed forward through the timeline, half paying attention. Then I saw it. The whole image shifted. Not like a glitch where it freezes or pixelates. It slid. Just slightly. Like the entire frame had been nudged to the left for a fraction of a second, then snapped back. I frowned and dragged the timeline back a bit. Watched it again. Same thing. The fence didn't line up for a split second. The edge of the driveway moved. The entire image shifted, then corrected. I checked the timestamp. 4. Then it jumped. 6 seconds missing. I leaned closer to the screen, scrolled back again, watched it slower. The shift was quick. Easy to miss if you weren't looking directly at it. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. It wasn't just the fence. Everything moved. The car, the pavement, even the shadows. All of it shifted together like the camera had been pushed sideways, but there was no shake, no blur, just a clean, smooth slide. Then back. I sat back in my chair, trying to figure out what could cause that. Loose mount? But the camera's fixed solid to the wall. I'd checked it myself when I installed it, and even if it had moved, it wouldn't snap back that cleanly. I opened the app and switched to the back camera. Same time. 2:13. Nothing unusual, no shift, no missing time, just the usual empty garden. I went back to the front camera, watched it again, same result, same 6 seconds gone. I checked earlier footage, nothing. Later footage, nothing. Just that one moment. I stood up and walked to the front window. Pulled the curtain aside slightly. The street looked normal, quiet, nothing out of place. I went outside, checked the camera itself, still firmly attached. No sign it had moved, no loose screws, nothing. I went back in and watched the footage again, paused it right before the shift. The image looked perfectly normal, fence straight, car where it should be. Then I played it frame by frame. The shift happened in a single frame, no transition, just normal, then slightly off. Normal again, then normal again, and those 6 seconds missing in between. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then, subtle, like when you're changing altitude. I swallowed. It didn't go away. I looked at the time on my phone, 10:27 a.m. I'd been watching that same clip for longer than I thought. I rubbed my eyes and leaned back, tried to shake the feeling. Then I noticed something else. In the frame right before the shift, the lighting looked different. Not brighter, not darker, just slightly off, like the contrast had changed. I zoomed in as much as the app would let me. The shadows near the car looked softer, the edge of the fence less defined. Then the shift happened, and everything snapped back to normal. I replayed it again, and again. Each time the same thing. That brief moment where the image didn't quite match itself. I checked the system logs. Nothing unusual. No alerts. No motion detection. No errors. Just that gap in time. I sat there for a while, staring at the paused frame, trying to convince myself it was just a glitch. Something with the recording. But it didn't feel like a glitch. It felt intentional. Like something had moved the frame. Not the camera. The frame itself. Later that night, I stayed up. Kept the live feed open on my phone, watching, waiting. The street stayed empty. No movement, no shifts. Everything looked normal. I checked the time around 2:13. Nothing happened. No flicker. No missing time. Just the usual quiet. I went to bed around 3. Left the app running. When I woke up, I checked the footage again. Scrolled straight to 2:13. Nothing. No shift. No gap. Just a continuous recording. I went back to the clip from the previous night. Still there. Same shift. Same missing seconds. I compared the 2 nights side by side. The frame from the first night, slightly off. The second night, perfectly aligned. I don't know why, but that made it worse. Because it meant whatever happened only happened once. And it wasn't random. Now, every morning, when I check the footage, I don't just look for movement. I pause at that same time, and I check the edges of the frame just to see if anything slips out of place for even a second. I noticed it because the wind stopped mid-gust. I was halfway through setting up my tent when it happened. 1 second the trees were moving, leaves rustling overhead, that constant background noise you stop noticing after a while. Then it just cut out. Not faded, not slowed. Stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. I froze for a second, still holding one of the tent poles, listening. Nothing. No wind. No leaves. No distant birds. Just silence. My name's Jordan. I'd driven out to a small forested area a couple hours from town. Nothing official, just a patch of woodland people use for hiking and the occasional overnight if you don't make a big deal about it. I'd picked a spot a little off the main trail near a clearing where the ground was flat enough for a tent. It was early evening, still light out, but the sun was starting to dip behind the trees. Everything had been normal up to that point. The air cool, a light breeze moving through the branches. Then nothing. I straightened up slowly, looking around. The trees weren't just still. They were too still. Not a single leaf moving. Not even the small ones that usually twitch even when the air's calm. I let go of the tent pole. It clinked softly against the ground. The sound felt louder than it should have. I listened again. Still nothing. No insects. No distant movement. It felt like the entire forest had gone quiet at once. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then. Subtle, like the moment before your ears pop. I swallowed. It didn't change. I took a step back from the tent, looking out into the trees. That's when I noticed something else. The air didn't look right. It was hard to explain. At first, I thought it was just my eyes adjusting to the light, but there was a section of the woods ahead of me where things looked off, like the space between the trees wasn't lining up properly. I squinted, trying to focus, and then I saw it, a faint shimmer, moving. Not fast, not slow, just steady. It passed between two trees about 20 feet in front of me, and as it did, the bark of the trees looked slightly warped, like I was seeing them through heat haze, but the air wasn't warm, not even close. The shimmer moved from left to right, straight line, no sound, no disturbance in the leaves, just that subtle distortion as it passed. I felt that tightness in my chest then, not panic, just that creeping awareness that something wasn't right. I stayed still, didn't move, didn't make a sound. The shimmer continued, passing through the trees. As it moved, the forest behind it looked slightly bent, like the space itself was being stretched, then snapping back once it passed. I took a slow step backward, my foot pressed into the dirt. No sound from it. Even that felt wrong. The shimmer didn't react, didn't change direction, just kept moving. It reached another tree, passed through it, and for a split second, the trunk looked thinner. Then normal again. I swallowed. The pressure in my ears deepened slightly. The air felt heavier, like it was pressing in from all sides. I glanced up at the canopy. Still completely still. Not a single leaf moving. I looked back at the shimmer. It was further away now, still moving in that same straight line, still bending the space around it. I thought about calling out, just to see if anything would happen. But something stopped me, a feeling that making noise wasn't a good idea, so I stayed quiet, watched. The shimmer reached the edge of the clearing, and then it faded, not disappearing all at once, just becoming less noticeable, until the trees behind it looked normal again, and it was gone. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the spot where it had been, waiting. Then the wind came back. All at once, leaves started moving again, branches creaking. The normal sounds of the forest rushed back in, like someone had unpaused everything. The pressure in my ears eased. The air felt normal again. I took a breath. It came out shaky. I looked around. Everything looked the same as before. Nothing out of place. No sign anything had passed through. I walked slowly to the edge of the clearing, to where the shimmer had been. Looked at the ground. Nothing. No tracks. No disturbed leaves. Just dirt and scattered twigs. I stood there for a minute, listening. The forest sounded normal again. Insects buzzing, leaves shifting, everything back to how it should be. I went back to my tent, finished setting it up, but I kept stopping, looking out into the trees, half expecting to see it again. I didn't. The rest of the night stayed quiet, normal. But now, whenever I'm out in the woods, I pay attention to the wind, because if it ever stops like that again, I know to look for something moving through the trees that you're not supposed to see. I noticed it because it didn't sound like it was coming from anything. I was in the kitchen just rinsing a mug when I heard it. At first, I thought it was the fridge acting up again. It's an old place, stuff makes noise, you get used to it. But this wasn't that. It was lower, more even. A steady hum. Not loud, but constant. I turned off the tap and just stood there for a second, listening. The sound didn't change, didn't fluctuate like a motor or anything mechanical. Just a flat, low tone. I moved toward the living room, trying to pinpoint it. It didn't get louder or quieter, it stayed the same. That's when I realized it wasn't coming from inside the house, it felt like it was above it. My name's Chris. I live in a small detached place just outside a village with a bit of space around it. No immediate neighbors on one side, just a narrow lane and a field beyond that. The house is old, and you can usually hear everything. Pipes, wind, even distant traffic if it's quiet enough. But this was different. It didn't echo. It didn't bounce. It just sat there like it was pressing down through the ceiling. I stood in the middle of the living room, looking up without thinking. The ceiling looked normal. Nothing moving, no lights, just the same faint shadows from the lamp in the corner. The hum continued, same pitch, same volume. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then, like when you're in an airplane and it starts to descend. I swallowed. It didn't go away. I walked into the hallway, the sound followed. Or maybe it didn't follow, it just stayed exactly the same, no matter no matter where I stood. I checked the fuse box, nothing tripped, everything normal. I turned off the lights. The hum didn't change. I unplugged the TV. Still there. I stood there in the dark, listening. The house felt wrong. Too quiet underneath the sound, like everything else had dropped away. I went to the front door, opened it, and the moment I stepped outside, it stopped, not faded, not reduced. Stopped, completely. I stood on the doorstep for a second, listening. Nothing, just the usual night sounds, a faint breeze, something moving in the distance. I stepped fully outside, closed the door behind me. The air felt normal, cool, light, no pressure in my ears. I looked up. The sky was clear, no clouds, a few stars visible, nothing out of place. I walked a few steps away from the house, still nothing, no hum, no sound at all. I turned back toward the door, hesitated, then opened it again. The hum came back instantly, same pitch, same volume. Like I'd stepped back into it. I froze in the doorway, half in, half out. Outside, silence. Inside, the hum, no transition, just on and off. I stepped back out. Silence, stepped in again, the hum returned. I felt that tightness in my chest then, not panic. Just that creeping sense that something wasn't right. I closed the door and stood in the hallway. The hum continued, steady, unchanged. I walked slowly toward the center of the house, listening carefully. It still felt like it was coming from above, not from any one room, just overhead. I went upstairs. Each step creaked under my weight. The sound of it felt sharper than usual. The hum didn't change. At the top of the stairs, I stopped, listened. Same tone, same pressure in my ears. I moved toward the bedroom. The hum felt slightly stronger there, not louder, just more present. I stood in the middle of the room, looking up at the ceiling, waiting. Nothing moved, nothing changed, just that sound. I reached up and touched the ceiling. Flat, cold, normal. The hum didn't react, didn't shift. I pulled my hand back, stood there for a few seconds. Then I did something I don't usually do. I turned off my phone, just to remove any chance it was interference or something. The hum stayed, unchanged. I went back downstairs. The sound followed, or stayed. I couldn't tell anymore. I checked the time, 11:48 p.m. It felt later. I don't know why. I stood in the living room again, listening, trying to figure out how long it had been going. Then, without warning, it stopped, just like that. No fade, no drop. Gone. The pressure in my ears eased immediately. The house felt normal again, quiet. But in a natural way, I stood there for a while, waiting to see if it would come back. It didn't. I went outside again, just to check. The air was still normal, no sound, nothing above the house. I looked up. The sky hadn't changed, no lights, no movement, just empty. I went back inside, closed the door. The silence stayed, everything back to how it should be. But now, every so often, when I'm in the house late at night, I stop and listen, because I don't know what was sitting above it like that, but I know it only existed while I was inside. I woke up already alert, not like slowly coming out of sleep. I mean fully awake. Heart already beating a little faster, like I'd just been shaken or called. I didn't move at first. I just lay there on my back, staring at the ceiling. Something felt wrong. Not loud, not obvious, just wrong. My name's Darren. I live alone in a small semi-detached place at the end of a quiet street. Nothing unusual about it. Same routine most nights. Lock the doors, close the curtains, go to bed. I always close the curtains. Always. That's why it stood out. After a few seconds of lying there, I shifted my eyes toward the window. The curtains weren't fully closed. Just a small gap, maybe an inch or two. Enough for a thin line of light to come through. Street light, I remember frowning slightly, because I knew I'd closed them properly before bed. I always check. It's just a habit. I stayed still for another few seconds, listening. The house was quiet, no footsteps, no creaks. Nothing out of place, but that feeling didn't go away. The sense that something had just been there. Close, like right next to the bed. I pushed myself up slowly onto my elbows. The room looked normal. Wardrobe in the corner, chair with clothes on it, door slightly ajar like I usually leave it. Nothing out of place, but the curtains, they were definitely open. Not wide, just enough to be noticeable. I swung my legs off the bed and stood up. The floor was cold. I walked over to the window. Each step felt louder than usual. I don't know why. I reached the curtains and paused, just looking at that gap. The light coming through didn't flicker, didn't change. Just a steady line. I pulled the curtains apart slightly, looked outside. The street was empty. Same as always at that hour. A parked car a few houses down, streetlight humming faintly. Nothing moving, no one standing there. I stood there for a few seconds, scanning. Nothing. I let the curtain fall back into place, but I didn't close it yet. I turned around slowly, looked at the bed. The sheets were slightly wrinkled where I'd been lying, but something about it felt off. I stepped closer, leaning down slightly. That's when I noticed it, the pillow. It wasn't where I'd left it. It was shifted. Not a lot, just slightly angled, like someone had leaned against it. I straightened up slowly. My chest felt tight. I told myself I could have moved it in my sleep. That happens. People move around, but I don't toss and turn much. I usually wake up in the same position. I looked back at the window, the gap in the curtains, still there, still letting in that thin strip of light. I walked over and closed them properly, pulled them tight, made sure there was no gap. Then I stood there, hands still on the fabric, listening. That's when I heard it, a faint sound, above me. Not loud, just a soft, steady tone, almost like a hum. I froze. It wasn't coming from inside the room. It felt like it was above the house. I tilted my head slightly, trying to focus on it. The sound didn't change, didn't get louder or quieter, just stayed constant. I stepped back from the window. The hum stayed. Same level, same pitch. I moved toward the door, opened it slowly. The hallway was dark, quiet. The hum was still there. I walked down the stairs, each step creaking slightly. The sound felt sharper than usual. The hum didn't change. I reached the bottom, stood in the living room, listening. Still there. I walked to the front door, opened it, stepped outside. The hum stopped instantly, just gone. I stood on the doorstep, looking up. The sky was clear, no clouds, no movement, nothing above the house. I stepped back inside. The hum came back, same as before, no delay, just on. I felt that same pressure in my ears then, subtle, like being at a slightly higher altitude. I closed the door, stood there, trying to understand what I was hearing, but there was no direction to it, no source, just above. I went back upstairs slowly. The hum stayed consistent, didn't change as I moved. I went into the bedroom again. The curtains were still closed, exactly how I'd left them. I stood there for a minute. Then, without thinking, I stepped over to the window again, pulled the curtains open slightly, looked out. Nothing. Same empty street, same still air. I let the curtain fall back, closed it again, and as soon as I did, the hum stopped. I stood there, waiting, listening, nothing. The pressure in my ears faded. The house went quiet again. I didn't sleep much after that. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening for that sound to come back. It didn't, but when I woke up in the morning, the curtains were slightly open again. Same gap, same thin line of light coming through. And I knew I hadn't touched them after closing them the second time. I noticed it because the fog didn't hide it. I was driving slow already. The road cuts through a stretch of low hills and fields, and that night the fog had settled in thick enough that you couldn't see more than maybe 20 feet ahead. Just a dull gray wall beyond the headlights. My name's Ben. I'd taken that road plenty of times, but not usually this late. It was just after 2 a.m., and there was no one else out there. The fog wasn't moving much either, just hanging there. Still, I had both hands on the wheel, leaning forward slightly, trying to keep the center line in view. That's when I saw the light, just ahead, maybe 15 feet in front of the car. A pale glow, not bright, almost like a reflection. But there was nothing around it to reflect. It hovered just above the road, maybe a foot or two off the surface. I eased off the accelerator without thinking. The car slowed. The light didn't move, didn't flicker, just stayed there, suspended in the fog. I remember squinting, trying to make out a shape, but there wasn't one. Just a soft, diffuse glow. The fog around it didn't light up. That's what didn't make sense. It should have scattered, brightened the mist, but it didn't. The glow stayed contained, like it wasn't interacting with the air properly. I tapped the brakes gently. The car crept forward. The light stayed exactly where it was. No shift, no reaction. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then. Subtle, like when you're driving up a steep hill. I swallowed. It didn't change. I rolled the window down a crack. Cold air slipped in, no sound, no hum, nothing coming from the light. I looked in the mirrors briefly, nothing behind me, just the same wall of fog. I looked forward again. The light was still there, unchanged. I edged closer, 10 feet now. The glow sharpened slightly, not brighter, just more defined, like the edges were becoming clearer. Still no shape. just a patch of light that didn't behave the way it should. I slowed almost to a stop. The car idled forward. The headlights hit the fog. The beams spread out, but the glow stayed separate, unaffected. I felt that tightness in my chest then, not panic, just that creeping sense that I was getting too close to something I didn't understand. I hovered my foot over the brake. The car rolled forward another few feet, 5 feet away now. The light didn't move, didn't react, just hung there. I noticed something else then. The fog directly behind it looked slightly off, like it was thinner or stretched. Hard to describe. I leaned forward, gripping the wheel tighter. The pressure in my ears increased slightly. The air inside the car felt heavier, like it wasn't moving. I stopped the car completely. The engine idled quietly. The glow stayed in place, just ahead, still hovering. I watched it for a few seconds, waiting for it to do something. Anything. It didn't. Then, slowly, it began to fade. Not outward, not spreading, just dimming. Evenly, like someone turning it down. The edges softened first, then the center. The glow lost intensity. The fog around it stayed unchanged. No reaction, no disturbance. I held my breath without realizing. Watching it disappear, the light grew fainter, fainter, then gone. The fog filled the space where it had been, uniform again, like nothing had been there at all. I sat there for a second, engine running, hands still on the wheel. The pressure in my ears eased. The air felt normal again. I exhaled slowly, looked around. Nothing, just fog. I waited, half expecting it to come back. It didn't. I eased the car forward, drove through the spot where the light had been. Nothing happened. No change in the fog, no sensation, just empty road. I kept driving, slow, careful. The rest of the road stayed the same. No more lights, no movement, just that thick, silent fog. When I finally reached clearer air, I pulled over for a minute. Sat there with the engine off, listening. Everything sounded normal again. Distant road noise, a faint breeze. I checked the time, 2:19. It felt like longer had passed, or maybe less. I couldn't tell. I just sat there for a while, looking back at the road I'd come from. The fog had swallowed it completely. Now, whenever I drive that stretch in heavy fog, I don't just watch the road. I look for anything that stays visible when it shouldn't, something that hangs there just long enough for you to reach it, and then disappears, like it was never there at all. I only noticed it because the angle didn't make sense. I was driving home late, just after midnight, taking the back road that cuts along the quarry. It's the quicker way, but there's no streetlights for most of it, just long stretches of open land and low hills. My name's Callum. I'd taken that route plenty of times. You get used to the dark out there. Your headlights become everything. It was a clear night, no clouds, just a cold, still sky. You could see stars if you bothered to look, but I wasn't. I was focused on the road. There's a bend about halfway through where the land opens up a bit, no trees on either side. Just gravel, scrub, and that wide empty sky above. That's where it happened. I came around the bend, and for a split second, my headlights caught something. Not on the road, not ahead, up, high above. It was just a flash at first, a brief reflection, like light bouncing off something smooth. I almost missed it. My brain tried to file it as nothing, maybe a bird, maybe a bit of dust on the windshield, but it wasn't. I slowed down without thinking, eyes flicking upward. There it was again, not a flash this time. A shape, faint, barely visible, but definitely there. Something curved, smooth, like a section of metal catching the light at just the right angle. It wasn't huge, or maybe it was and just far away. I couldn't tell. There was no reference point. It didn't have lights. Didn't glow. It only existed when my headlights hit it at that angle. I slowed the car more, almost crawling now, trying to keep it in view. The road dipped slightly and the angle changed. The reflection shifted. That's when it moved. Not drifting, not gliding. It tilted, just slightly, like something adjusting its position. And the reflection slid across its surface in a way that made it clear it wasn't flat. It had shape, curved, smooth, and then it was gone. Not faded, not hidden. Gone, upward, instantly, like it had been pulled straight up out of sight. I slammed the brakes harder than I meant to. The car jerked to a stop in the middle of the road. I just sat there, hands tight on the wheel, looking up. The sky was empty, completely empty. No sound, no movement, nothing. I rolled the window down. Cold air rushed in. I listened. Nothing. No hum, no wind, just silence. I stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched under my shoes. That sound felt too loud. I looked up again, scanning the sky, trying to find anything. There was nothing, no shape, no reflection, just stars. I stood there for maybe a minute, maybe less. It felt longer. I got back in the car, sat there with the engine running, trying to process what I'd seen. I told myself it could have been something simple, a drone maybe, but it hadn't made a sound, and it had moved too fast, too clean. I pulled forward slowly, kept driving, but I couldn't stop looking up. Every few seconds, my eyes would flick away from the road, trying to catch it again. I didn't. The rest of the drive was normal, too normal. When I got closer to town, the streetlights came back. Everything felt grounded again, but something else started to bother me. The time. I glanced at the dashboard clock. It said 12:47. I frowned. That didn't line up. I knew roughly what time I'd left, and even with slowing down, even with stopping, it shouldn't have taken that long. I tried to retrace it in my head. The bend, the reflection, stopping the car, getting out, a minute, maybe two. Not enough to account for it. I told myself I was just off, that I'd misremembered, but it stuck with me. The next morning, I checked my phone. Just out of curiosity, there was a gap, a small one. Nothing dramatic, but enough to notice. A few minutes where there were no notifications, no activity, just a blank space. I went back to that road a few days later, during the day. Same bend, same stretch. There was nothing there. Nothing that could have reflected like that. No towers, no wires, no structures, just open sky. I even got out of the car again, stood in the same spot, looked up, trying to imagine where it had been, how high it was. There was nothing to compare it to, nothing to measure against, just that empty space. Now, every time I drive that road at night, I keep my eyes on the sky just as much as the road, because whatever caught my headlights that night, it wasn't supposed to be there, and it noticed the moment I saw it. The power went out all at once. No flicker, no warning, just everything cutting to black mid-sentence while I was in the middle of watching something. The TV died, the lamp beside me went off, even the little standby lights on the router disappeared. I sat there for a second, just listening. My name's Lewis. I live in a small town where outages aren't super common, but they do happen now and then, usually during storms. But that night, there wasn't any weather. No wind, no rain, just quiet. I stood up and went to the window. The house felt bigger in the dark, like the walls had pulled back slightly. I pulled the curtain aside and looked out. Every house on the street was dark. No porch lights, no street lights, nothing. It wasn't just my place. The whole area was out. I stood there for a bit, letting my eyes adjust. The sky had that dim, grainy look it gets when there's no artificial light around. You could see more of it than usual. That's when I noticed something odd. The clouds. They weren't thick, just a light layer barely visible against the sky. But there was a faint brightness forming inside them. At first, I thought it was just my eyes adjusting, picking up more detail. But then it became clearer, a soft glow. Very faint, like a circle. I leaned closer to the window. The glow wasn't lighting the clouds evenly. It was contained like a shape pressed into them from above. A ring. Not perfectly sharp, but definitely circular. It wasn't big, or maybe it was, and just far away. Hard to tell without anything to compare it to. I opened the window. Cold air slipped in. The street was completely silent. No generators kicking in. No voices. No cars. Just that empty quiet. I stepped back, grabbed my jacket, and went outside. The gravel driveway crunched under my shoes. That sound felt louder than it should have, like it was the only thing in the world making noise. I looked up again. The ring was still there, faint, barely brighter than the clouds themselves, but definitely there. It wasn't moving, not drifting with the clouds, not expanding, just sitting in one place. I stood in the driveway, staring at it, trying to figure out what I was looking at. There was no beam of light coming from the ground, nothing projecting upward, and the glow wasn't strong enough to be coming from below anyway. It looked like it was inside the clouds, or behind them. I noticed something else then. The edges of the ring weren't perfectly even. They wavered slightly, like the shape wasn't completely stable. I took a few steps forward out into the street, still no sound, no wind, nothing. The air felt still, too still. I swallowed and felt a slight pressure in my ears, not painful, just noticeable, like the air pressure had changed slightly. I kept looking up. The ring didn't react, didn't shift, didn't brighten, just stayed there. I tried to focus on the center of it. It looked darker than the rest of the clouds. Not by much, just enough to notice if you were really looking. I stood there for maybe a minute, maybe longer. Time felt off, like it wasn't moving at the usual pace. Then, slowly, the ring began to fade. Not outward, not spreading, just losing intensity. The edges softened first, then the center. The whole shape dimmed evenly, until it was just part of the clouds again. Then, gone. I kept staring at the spot where it had been, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. A few seconds later, the streetlights flickered on, one by one. Then the houses, lights coming back, a distant hum of electricity returning. The normal sounds followed, a dog barking somewhere, a car starting up down the road, everything sliding back into place. I stood there a bit longer, looking up. The sky looked normal again, just clouds. Nothing unusual. I went back inside. The TV came back on by itself, the program still playing. I checked the time. It had only been a couple of minutes. It felt longer. I don't know how much longer. The next day, I asked a couple of neighbors if they'd seen anything during the outage. Most of them just complained about the power being off. One of them, an older guy named Martin, said he'd stepped outside too. I asked if he noticed anything in the sky. He hesitated for a second, then just said it was brighter than usual. Nothing else. I didn't push it. Now, whenever the power cuts out, I don't just wait for the lights to come back. I go outside and I look up. Because whatever made that ring, it didn't move, it didn't spread. It just appeared and then stopped existing like it was never there. I noticed the compass first. I'd stopped to check my direction because the trail had thinned out more than I expected. It wasn't a proper marked path anymore, just a worn line along the ridge where people had walked before. My name's Nate. I was out hiking alone, a day trip up along a ridge that overlooks a long stretch of forest and low hills. It was late afternoon, heading toward dusk, clear sky, no wind, just that quiet you get when you're high enough that everything below feels distant. I pulled the compass out of my pocket, more out of habit than necessity. The needle didn't settle. It drifted. Not spinning wildly, just easing off center, a few degrees to the right. Then stopping. I frowned and tilted it slightly, thinking maybe I wasn't holding it level. The needle shifted again, then stopped in a slightly different position. I held it still, watching. Usually it corrects itself quickly. This didn't. It just stayed there. I tapped the side lightly with my finger. The needle twitched, then drifted again. Slow, deliberate, then stopped, still not pointing north. I turned in a slow circle, watching it. The needle didn't track properly. It lagged, like it was trying to catch up but couldn't quite get there. I checked my phone next. The map loaded fine. Compass app said I was facing northeast, but the physical compass wasn't agreeing. Not even close. I stood there for a minute trying to figure it out. No power lines, no metal structures, nothing around that should interfere, just rock, dirt, and scrub. I slipped the compass back into my pocket, telling myself it was probably just faulty. Started walking again. That's when I noticed how quiet it had gotten. There hadn't been much noise before, just occasional wind, distant birds. But now, nothing. No wind at all, not even a breeze. The grass along the ridge was completely still. I stopped again, listened. Nothing. Even my own footsteps sounded too sharp when I shifted my weight. I looked out over the ridge. The forest below looked normal, no movement that stood out. But something about the stillness felt wrong, like the air was heavier. I took a step forward along the ridge. The ground crunched under my boot. The sound seemed to hang there longer than it should. I reached for the compass again. Pulled it out. The needle was still off, same direction as before, not correcting. I turned slowly. The needle moved slightly, but never settled. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then, subtle, like when you change elevation quickly. I swallowed. It didn't go away. I looked out across the ridge again. That's when I saw it. Far out, near the horizon, a faint glow. It wasn't bright, barely noticeable. If I hadn't been looking directly in that direction, I might have missed it. It sat low, just above the tree line in the distance. A soft, pale light. I stood still, watching. The glow didn't spread, didn't move, just hovered there. Then, it pulsed. Once. Not a flash, more like it intensified for a second, then returned to the same dim level. I blinked, trying to focus on it. The pressure in my ears deepened slightly. The air felt thicker. I took a step back without thinking. The glow didn't change. Still there, still faint. I glanced down at the compass. The needle had shifted again, further off, almost pointing east now. I turned slightly, the needle lagged behind, then stopped again. Still wrong. I looked back at the glow. It hadn't pulsed again, just sat there, quiet, still. I realized then I couldn't hear anything at all, not even distant birds, no wind, nothing, just that silence. I felt a tightness in my chest, not panic, just a growing sense that I shouldn't be standing there, that I should move. I took another step back. The pressure in my ears eased slightly. I stepped forward again. It came back, same as before, like I was crossing some invisible boundary. I stayed where I was, not moving, watching the glow, waiting for it to do something else. It didn't. After a few seconds, it started to fade. Not outward, not spreading, just dimming, slowly, until it was gone. Blended back into the horizon. The trees looked normal again, nothing out of place. The pressure in my ears eased completely. The air felt lighter. A faint breeze picked up, just enough to move the grass slightly. I stood there for a minute longer, looking at the spot where the glow had been. Then I checked the compass again. The needle snapped back to north instantly, like nothing had been wrong. I turned it. It tracked properly. No lag, no drift, just normal. I put it away slowly, started heading back down the ridge. I didn't want to stay up there any longer. The rest of the hike was uneventful. Normal sounds came back. Wind, distant birds, everything as it should be. But when I checked the time at the bottom, it didn't line up. I'd lost maybe 20 minutes, maybe more. I couldn't account for it. I hadn't stopped that long. Now, whenever I'm out hiking, I still carry that same compass. It's never done that again. But I don't just check it for direction anymore. I watch to see if it starts drifting, because I know now that when it does, something else out there is shifting too. I felt it before I saw anything. It was that quick pressure shift in my ears, like when you go up in an elevator too fast. Not painful, just sudden enough to make me stop what I was doing. I was standing in my backyard at the time, just taking the bin out. It was late, maybe around 11:30. Clear night, no wind, one of those quiet ones where sound carries further than usual. My name's Aaron. I live on the edge of a small estate with fields behind the fence line. It's usually dead quiet at night. That's why the pressure stood out. I paused near the gate, one hand still on the bin lid, and swallowed, trying to clear it. It didn't go away. If anything, it felt like it deepened slightly. I looked up without really thinking about it. At first, I didn't see anything, just the usual sky, dark, scattered stars, nothing unusual. Then I noticed something moving. Not fast, not slow, just steady. A small point of light, dim, barely brighter than the stars around it, but it was moving in a way that didn't match anything I'd seen before. It wasn't blinking like a plane, didn't have the constant brightness of a satellite, and it wasn't following a straight path. It drifted. Slightly off, like it was adjusting itself. I stood there, watching it. The pressure in my ears stayed constant. I tried swallowing again. Nothing. I stepped a little further into the yard, tilting my head back to keep it in view. The light continued across the sky, silent, completely silent. That's what started to bother me. Even distant planes make some kind of sound if you listen long enough. This didn't. It just moved. I noticed something else then. The stars around it looked off, not disappearing, just slightly dimmer for a moment as it passed near them, like something was between me and them. But there was no shape, just that point of light. I shifted my weight, trying to get a better angle. The pressure in my ears changed slightly, like it pulsed, in time with nothing I could identify. I glanced toward the house for a second. All the windows were dark, everything normal. I looked back up. The light had moved further now, still drifting, still silent. I felt a slight unease then. Nothing overwhelming, just that sense that I shouldn't be standing there watching it. I don't know why. It wasn't doing anything aggressive. It wasn't even that noticeable unless you were looking for it. But something about it felt wrong. I took a step back toward the door. The pressure in my ears eased slightly. I stopped, looked up again. The light was still there, still moving. I stepped forward again. The pressure returned, immediate, like crossing an invisible line. I froze, tested it again. One step back, pressure eased, one step forward, pressure came back. I stood there for a few seconds just repeating it, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. But it was consistent, exactly the same each time. I looked up again. The light had slowed, not by much, but enough to notice. It hovered slightly, just for a second, then continued. The stars around it dimmed again briefly, same effect. Subtle. But there, I felt my chest tighten a bit. I didn't like the idea that it had changed behavior while I was watching it. I stepped back again, further this time, closer to the house. The pressure in my ears faded completely. I stayed there, watching from a distance. The light picked up its steady movement again, drifting across the sky, no sound, no change in brightness, just that same faint point. Then, without warning, it shifted, not a smooth turn, not a curve, a sudden change in direction like it had snapped to a new path. Upward, at an angle, it moved faster now, still silent. The point of light grew slightly fainter as it climbed, then dimmer, then gone. No fade, no trail, just not there anymore. I stood there for a while, looking at the empty sky, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. The air felt normal again. No pressure, no strange sensation, just quiet. I went back inside, closed the door behind me. The house felt the same as it always did, safe, still. But I kept thinking about that invisible line in the yard, the exact spot where the pressure started, like I'd stepped into something I wasn't supposed to notice. The next day, I went out and checked. Same spot, same yard, nothing unusual, no marks, no difference in the ground, just grass. Now, every time I step out there at night, I pay attention to how the air feels, because I know there's at least one place where something changed without making a sound, and something above noticed I was standing in it. I felt it through the seat before I noticed anything else. Just a quick vibration, not strong, not like something hitting the car, more like a low, steady buzz that lasted maybe a second or two, then stopped. I shifted slightly, thinking maybe I'd imagined it. The engine was off, keys out of the ignition. I was just sitting there in a quiet car park behind a closed supermarket, killing time before heading home. My name's Daniel. I'd pulled in there because I didn't feel like going straight back to my flat. It was late, around 1 a.m., and the place was empty. No other cars, no people, just rows of dark windows and a couple of dim security lights. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the steering wheel. Everything felt normal again, still, silent. Then it happened again. Another brief vibration, slightly longer this time. I sat up straight, paying attention now. The kind of vibration you feel through your back more than anything else. Low frequency. Not coming from the engine, because that was off. Not from the ground either, at least not in a way I recognized. I looked around the car park. Nothing moving. No trucks passing nearby, no machinery running, just empty space. I glanced at the dashboard. Everything was off. No warning lights, no signs of anything electrical acting up. Then I noticed something in the rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was just one of the security lights reflecting weirdly, but it didn't match. The angle was wrong. I adjusted the mirror slightly. The glow stayed in the same place, above, faint, soft, not bright enough to light anything around it. Just there. I turned in my seat and looked out the back window. There was nothing obvious, just the dark outline of the building behind me and the empty car park stretching out. I turned back to the mirror. The glow was still there, suspended above the car, not directly overhead, a little behind. It didn't flicker, didn't move, just lingered. I felt that pressure in my ears then, subtle, like a change in altitude. I swallowed. It didn't go away. I kept watching the mirror. The glow stayed steady. I reached up and adjusted it again, just to make sure it wasn't some weird reflection. It wasn't. No matter how I angled it, the light stayed fixed in the same relative position. I slowly cracked the window open. Cool night air slipped in. No sound, no hum, nothing. The vibration came again. Stronger this time, longer. It ran through the seat and into my back, then faded. I froze. The glow in the mirror seemed slightly clearer now, not brighter, just more defined, like I could almost see an edge to it. But it wasn't a solid shape, just a patch of dim light that didn't behave like normal light. It didn't spread, didn't reflect off anything. I glanced out the front windshield, half expecting to see something there too. Nothing. Just the empty car park and the distant road. I looked back at the mirror. The glow was still there, unchanged. I felt that tightness in my chest then, the kind that comes when something doesn't make sense but your body reacts anyway. I reached for the door handle, paused, then pulled it. Stepped out of the car. The moment my feet hit the ground, the vibration stopped. Completely. I stood there, door still open, looking up. There was nothing visible in the sky. No light, no shape, just darkness. I looked back at the mirror. The glow was still there, visible from inside the car. I leaned slightly, peering through the open door at the rearview mirror from outside. It was still showing that faint light, even though when I looked up directly, there was nothing. I stepped back a bit more. The air felt normal, no pressure in my ears, no vibration, just quiet. I stepped back into the car slowly, sat down, closed the door. The vibration returned immediately, low, steady. The glow in the mirror hadn't moved, still hovering, still faint. I stared at it, trying to force my eyes to adjust, to make out more detail. For a second, I thought I saw it shift, not in position, in angle, like something tilting. The glow stretched slightly, then snapped back. The vibration pulsed again. In time with that movement, I felt my hands tighten on the steering wheel. I didn't like being inside the car anymore. It felt enclosed, like I was sitting inside something I couldn't see. I reached for the keys, started the engine. The moment it turned over, the vibration stopped. The glow in the mirror flickered. Just once, then dimmed. I didn't wait. I put the car in gear and pulled out of the space. As I drove forward, I kept glancing at the mirror. The glow lingered for a few seconds, then faded completely. By the time I reached the exit of the car park, it was gone. I didn't look back. I drove straight home. The car felt normal again. No vibration, no pressure, nothing. The next day I checked the car, sat in it with the engine off, waited. Nothing happened. Everything felt exactly how it should. But now, whenever I'm sitting in a parked car at night, I don't just look around the car park. I check the mirror. Because whatever that was, it wasn't above me the way normal things are. It was only visible from inside. I noticed it when I slowed down. Not stopped, just slowed for a second to check my phone. My shadow didn't. I was walking home from a late shift, cutting through a residential area I've taken 100 times before. It was just after 11, quiet, most of the houses dark except for the occasional living room light or hallway glow. My name's Ryan. I work evenings, so walking back at night isn't unusual for me. You get used to how things look under streetlights, how shadows stretch and shrink as you pass. There's a stretch of road near my place where the lights are spaced a bit further apart. You walk through patches of brightness, then darker gaps, then back into light again. I was in one of those lit sections when I slowed down to check a message. Just a quick glance, but something felt off. I didn't catch it right away. It was more like my brain registered it before I did. I looked up, took another step. That's when I saw it. My shadow was still moving, just slightly, like it hadn't quite matched my pace when I slowed. It dragged behind me by maybe half a step. Then, as I started walking normally again, it snapped back into place. Perfectly aligned. I stopped. Fully this time. My shadow stopped too, exactly when I did. I stood there for a second, staring down at the pavement. Everything looked normal. The angle of the light made sense. The shape looked right. I moved my foot forward slowly. The shadow followed immediately. No delay. I let out a small breath, half laughing to myself. Figured I'd just imagined it. Tired, distracted. I started walking again, a few steps forward. Everything normal. Then I passed under the next streetlight. That's when it happened again. This time, I wasn't slowing down. I was walking at a steady pace, but my shadow, it didn't keep up. It lagged, just slightly, like it was reacting a fraction of a second late. I noticed it mid-step. The outline of my legs wasn't quite matching where they should be. It was off. Not by much, but enough to feel wrong. I slowed down again. My shadow kept moving for that extra fraction of a second, then caught up. I stopped. It stopped. Right on time. I looked around. The street was empty. No cars, no people. Just the quiet hum of distant traffic and the occasional rustle from somewhere far off. I looked back down at the pavement, waited. Then I took another step. Slow, deliberate. The shadow followed. No delay. Perfect. I took another step. Same thing. Normal. I stood there for a second longer, then started walking again, trying to ignore it, telling myself it was just the angle of the light or my eyes adjusting. But I couldn't stop watching it. Every step, every movement, checking, making sure it lined up. I reached another patch of light. The shadow stretched out again, and for a few seconds, nothing happened. It behaved exactly how it should. I started to relax a bit. Then I shifted my pace slightly, not even slowing much, just enough to adjust my stride. And there it was, that lag, My shadow didn't match. It stayed where it was for a fraction longer than it should have, then slid forward, catching up, like it was correcting itself. I stopped walking completely. The shadow stopped too, but not instantly. There was that tiny delay. Then it locked into place. I felt that tightness in my chest then. Not panic, just that creeping discomfort. Like something small wasn't right in a way I couldn't explain. I looked up at the streetlight. It was steady, no flicker, no movement. I looked behind me. The road was empty. I stepped backward. The shadow followed. But again, just slightly late, I watched it carefully, trying to track the exact moment it moved. It wasn't random. It was consistent. A delay, always the same. I turned slightly, shifting my angle to the light. The shadow stretched differently, but the lag stayed. I could feel my breathing getting a bit shallower. I didn't like it. Didn't like standing there testing it, so I started walking again, faster this time. My footsteps echoed softly on the pavement. The shadow kept up, at first. Then, after a few steps, it fell behind again, just slightly. Then caught up. I didn't stop this time. I kept walking, quickening my pace. The houses around me stayed dark, no movement in the windows. No one outside, just me and the sound of my own steps. And that shadow, always just a fraction off. I turned onto my street. There's a brighter light near the corner. I stepped into it, and the shadow snapped perfectly into place. No delay, no lag, just normal. I stopped, watched it, moved my foot. It followed instantly. I took a few more steps, still normal. I stood there for a minute, waiting for it to happen again. It didn't. I walked the rest of the way home. Everything felt fine. No delay, no strange movement, just a normal shadow under steady light. When I got inside, I didn't think much of it at first. Locked the door, turned on the lights. Everything felt normal. But later, when I went upstairs, I noticed something. The light from the hallway cast my shadow onto the wall. I stood there for a second, then moved my hand. The shadow followed. Perfectly. No delay. I moved again. Same thing. Normal. I told myself it was nothing. Just something about the streetlights, the angle, my eyes playing tricks. But now, when I walk home at night, I don't just watch where I'm going. I watch how my shadow moves. Because I know what it looks like when it's not keeping up, and I don't know what it was catching up from. I didn't think anything of it until he knocked. It was late morning. I just made coffee and was halfway through checking emails when I heard someone at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated for a second before answering. It was my neighbor, Carl. He lives 2 houses down. We don't talk much, just the usual nod when passing by. He looked off. Not panicked, not urgent, just unsure. "Hey," he said, glancing past me toward the inside of the house like he didn't want to step too close. "You, got cameras, right?" I nodded. "Yeah. Why?" He paused, like he was deciding whether to say it. "Did you notice anything last night?" I frowned. "Like what?" He shifted his weight, eyes flicking up toward my roof. "I saw lights. Above your place. Not like a plane or anything, just hovering." I let out a small breath through my nose. "What kind of lights?" He shook his head slightly. "Hard to explain. Not bright, just there. Stayed for a bit, then gone." I waited for him to add more. He didn't. "You sure it wasn't a drone?" I asked. "Maybe," he said, but didn't sound convinced. But it didn't move like one, and it was quiet. That part made me pause. "Anyway," he added quickly, like he didn't want to dwell on it. "Figured I'd mention it. You've got cameras, so maybe you caught something." I told him I'd check. He nodded, said thanks, and headed back down the path. I closed the door and stood there for a second. Then I went straight to the laptop. "My name's Sean. I've got a basic security setup. 2 cameras, 1 covering the front driveway, 1 in the back garden. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep an eye on things." I pulled up the footage from the night before. Scrolled back to around midnight. Carl didn't say exactly when he saw it, so I started skimming. Everything looked normal at first. The driveway camera showed nothing but still air and the empty street. The garden cam was the same. No movement, no lights, just the usual low-quality night image. I scrubbed forward. Around 1:10 a.m., something changed. Not obvious, just a flicker. The image warped slightly, like the frame had stretched for a split second, then it snapped back. I paused it, went back a few frames, played it again. Same thing, a brief distortion, almost like heat shimmer, but sharper, more defined. I leaned closer to the screen. The timestamp caught my eye. It jumped. Not by much, maybe 3 seconds, but it skipped. One frame showed 01102022. The next was 125. No transition, just missing time. I scrolled through the rest of that segment. Nothing else stood out, no lights, no shapes, just that one flicker. I switched to the front camera. Same time, same thing. A slight distortion, the image stretched for a fraction of a second, then returned to normal. And the timestamp skipped. I sat back in my chair. That didn't match what Carl described. No hovering lights, no visible objects, just a glitch. I told myself it was probably just a recording error. Cheap system, after all. But something about it didn't feel right. I went back further, rewatched the footage leading up to it. Everything normal, still, quiet. Then the flicker, then normal again. No lead up, no aftermath, just that moment. I checked earlier in the night. Nothing. Later. Nothing. Just that one point. I got up and went outside, stood in the driveway, looked up at the roof. Nothing unusual. Clear sky. Same as always. I walked around to the back, looked up again. Nothing. No signs of anything. No marks, no damage, just the usual. I went back inside, sat down again, opened the footage one more time, slowed it down, frame by frame. At the exact moment of the flicker, the image didn't just distort, it shifted, like the perspective had changed slightly. For one frame, then corrected. It was subtle, easy to miss, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The angle of the camera view was off by just enough to feel wrong. Then back to normal. I checked the system logs. Nothing unusual, no alerts, no recorded errors, just that gap in time. I left it for a while, tried to move on with the day, but it kept bothering me. So that night I stayed up, sat in the living room with the lights off, watching the monitors, waiting. Nothing happened for hours. Everything stayed still, normal. Then, around the same time, 1:10, I heard something. Not loud, just a faint shift in the air, like a pressure change. My ears popped slightly. I sat up straighter, looked at the screens. Everything looked the same, but the feeling in the room had changed, like the space itself was slightly off. I stood up slowly, walked to the front door, opened it, stepped outside. The air felt normal, no pressure, no sound. I looked up, nothing. I stepped back inside. The pressure returned, subtle, but there. I looked at the monitors again for a split second. The image flickered, same distortion, same shift, then normal. I rushed over, checked the timestamp. It had jumped again. Same gap, same few seconds missing. I stood there, staring at the screen, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The pressure eased. The room felt normal again. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, I checked the footage, same as before. No lights, no visible object, just that brief flicker and missing time. Carl came by later that day, asked if I saw anything. I told him no, just a glitch. He nodded, but didn't seem convinced. Now, every night around that time, I find myself watching the monitors, waiting for that flicker. Because whatever he saw above the house, the cameras didn't capture it. They only recorded the moment something interrupted them, and then erased itself like it was never there. I was already awake when it started. I work early shifts sometimes, so it wasn't unusual for me to be up before sunrise. That morning, I was in the kitchen, just standing there waiting for the kettle, looking out the back window. It was one of those cold, still mornings. Not foggy exactly, but the air felt heavy, like everything outside was just sitting there. No wind, no birds, nothing moving. The sky was still dark, but just starting to lighten at the edges. At least, that's what I expected. Instead, there was this strip. It took me a second to even register it properly. Out past the fields behind my house, above the line of trees, there was a vertical band of light. Not wide, maybe the width of a couple of houses if you held your arm out. It went straight up from the horizon into the sky, not glowing like sunrise. More like a section of the sky was brighter than everything else. Perfectly straight edges. I remember thinking it looked like a slit. I set the kettle down without realizing and just stood there staring at it. At first I thought it might be some weird reflection on the glass, so I stepped closer. It didn't move, didn't change. I unlocked the back door and stepped outside. The air felt colder than I expected, not freezing, just sharp. I looked up again. The strip was still there, same place, same shape. It wasn't spreading like a normal sunrise would. It wasn't soft around the edges. It didn't blend into the rest of the sky. It was just there. Like someone had taken a vertical slice of daylight and stuck it into the dark. I remember checking the rest of the horizon. Nothing. No gradual light anywhere else, just that one band. I stood there for a while, trying to make sense of it. Planes leave trails, but this wasn't moving. Clouds can catch light, but there were barely any clouds at all, and it wasn't lighting anything underneath it. That's the part that felt wrong. The fields below it were still dark. The trees were still silhouettes. If it was light, it wasn't acting like light. I pulled my phone out and tried to record it. The screen made it look dimmer than it actually was, but you could still see it. Just a faint vertical brightness cutting through the sky. While I was filming, it changed. Not suddenly, slowly. The bottom edge started to pull upward. At first I thought it was just fading from the bottom, like the light was weakening, but it wasn't fading. It was moving. The entire band was retracting upward, like it was being lifted. The bottom edge stayed clean and straight the whole time. No blur, no gradient, just a sharp line sliding up. I remember lowering the phone a bit, just watching it directly because it didn't look real through the screen. It kept moving, slowly, no sound, no flicker, just rising. The top of it stayed fixed for a moment, then it started to shorten from both ends, like the whole thing was being pulled tighter. I realized then that it wasn't actually reaching as high into the sky as I first thought. It just looked like it did because of how straight it was. As it retracted, it got shorter, smaller, still perfectly vertical, still completely separate from the rest of the sky. My ears popped. That's the only physical thing I noticed. Just a quick pressure change, like going up in an elevator. I swallowed, tried to equalize it, but it didn't fully go away until the light was almost gone. The strip kept shrinking until it was just a narrow column, then a line, then a point, and then nothing. The sky went back to looking normal. Still dark, still early. But now the actual sunrise started to show. A soft glow spreading across the horizon like it was supposed to. Gradual, even. Nothing like what I'd just seen. I stood there for a while after it disappeared. Just listening. The quiet felt different, like it had been interrupted and was settling back into place. Eventually I went back inside. Watched the video I took. You could see it, but it didn't look as clear as it did in person. Just a faint vertical brightness that slowly shrinks upward. If you didn't know what you were looking at, you'd probably think it was some weird camera artifact. I checked the timestamp. It covered about 40 seconds, but it didn't feel that long when I was watching it. Later that morning, I mentioned it to my neighbor Elise when I saw her putting bins out. She said she'd been awake around that time, but didn't notice anything. I didn't push it, just said it was probably nothing. That night, I went outside again around the same time, stood in the same spot, watched the same stretch of sky. Everything looked normal. The next morning, too. Normal sunrise. No vertical light, nothing out of place. But now, whenever I wake up before dawn, I check, not the whole sky, just that one spot above the trees. Because I keep thinking about how it moved, not like something appearing, not like something fading, more like something that was already there and then decided to leave. I noticed it on a straight stretch of road where there shouldn't have been anything to notice. It was late, maybe around 2 a.m. I was driving back from a job in a small town about 40 minutes out. I do maintenance work, boilers, electrical stuff, whatever comes in. That night had run longer than expected, and by the time I got on the road, everything was dead quiet. No other cars, no houses close by. Just long fields on both sides and those low hedges that break up the land. My name's Callum, by the way. I've done that drive more times than I can count, so I know exactly what it looks like at night. You get used to how your headlights stretch ahead, how objects pop out of the dark as you get closer. There's nothing surprising about it. That's why it stood out. I was doing about 50, just cruising, when my headlights caught something up ahead. At first, it looked like a post, one of those short roadside markers. Thin, vertical, nothing unusual. But the moment the light hit it, I saw two shadows behind it. Not overlapping, not blurred. Two distinct shadows side by side, stretching away at slightly different angles. I remember blinking, thinking maybe it was just my eyes adjusting. I kept driving. The object got closer. The shadows stayed. Two of them. Clear, sharp, as if there were two light sources, but there weren't. Just my headlights. I checked the dashboard reflexively, like something there might explain it. Everything normal. I looked back up. still two shadows. Then, just as I got close enough to see the post clearly, it was gone. Not the post. That was still there. But the second shadow, it disappeared. Cleanly, like it had never been there at all. Just one shadow again. Normal. I passed it. Checked the rearview mirror. Nothing unusual. No second shadow behind me. No extra light. Just darkness. I slowed down a bit. Didn't stop, but dropped my speed. My first thought was, maybe there was another car somewhere behind me, just out of view. But the road had been empty for miles, and if there was a car, I would have seen the lights, or at least the glow. I glanced in the mirrors again. Nothing. Just black road behind me. I drove on, trying to shake it off, telling myself it was just some weird angle, maybe something reflected in the distance. But a few minutes later, it happened again. Different spot, same kind of roadside marker. Same setup. Headlights hit it. Two shadows. This time I didn't blink. I kept my eyes locked on it, watched closely. The shadows weren't identical. One was slightly darker, the other just a bit lighter, like it wasn't as strong. But both were clearly there, both moving exactly with the post as I approached. I shifted slightly in my seat, adjusting my angle. The shadows didn't change, didn't merge, didn't separate further. They just stayed, until I got close. Then, one of them dropped away. Instantly. No fade, no transition, just gone. Back to one shadow. I passed the marker, looked in the mirror. Nothing. Again, I felt that slow, creeping discomfort building. Not panic, just awareness. Like something wasn't lining up with how things should work. I started paying more attention to everything around me. The road, the hedges, the sky, the dashboard, looking for anything else that might be off. At some point I noticed how quiet it felt. Not silent. The engine was still running, but the usual background noise felt dampened, like the sound wasn't carrying as far. I turned the radio on just to have something normal. Static at first, then a faint station came through. I left it low, kept driving. A few minutes later, I saw something else ahead. Not a post this time, a sign. Wider, more solid. I watched it carefully as my headlights reached it. Two shadows again, clear as anything. This time I slowed down more, almost to a crawl. The shadows stayed, perfectly aligned with the sign. I could see the edges clearly on the road behind it, two distinct outlines. I leaned forward slightly, trying to see if there was any other light source. Nothing, just the beam from my car. Then something shifted, not the shadows, the light itself. For a split second, the beam ahead looked off, like it had spread wider than it should. Just for a moment, then it snapped back. At the same time, one of the shadows vanished. I stopped the car. Right there in the road, the sign was just ahead of me, casting one normal shadow. Everything looked fine. I turned off the engine, sat there, listening. The quiet came back fully. No hum, no radio, nothing. I stepped out of the car. The air felt normal, cool. Still, I walked a few steps forward, looked at the sign. Nothing unusual. I turned around slowly, looked back down the road behind me. Pitch black, no headlights, no movement. I stood there for maybe a minute, trying to make sense of it. Then I got back in the car, started it up. The radio crackled again. Same faint station. I drove the rest of the way home without seeing anything else. No double shadows, no strange light. Everything behaved exactly how it should. When I pulled into my driveway, I turned the headlights off and just sat there for a second, looking at the front of the house. The porch light cast a shadow of the railing across the wall. One shadow. Normal. I got out, went inside. But now, when I drive that road at night, I don't just watch what's in front of me. I watch the shadows, because I don't know what was creating the second one, and I don't know where it went when it disappeared. It started as something I thought was part of a dream, a faint tapping. Slow, evenly spaced. I was half asleep when I heard it the first time, and I remember thinking it was just something outside. Branches, maybe, or something shifting in the wind. But there wasn't any wind. I live on the second floor of a small place just outside town. No trees close enough to reach the walls. The side of my bedroom faces a narrow gap between my building and the next one over, just brick and concrete. Nothing that should have been tapping. The sound came again. 3 taps, pause, then 3 more. Not random, deliberate. I opened my eyes, still lying flat on my back, staring up at the ceiling. The room was dark, just a bit of light coming through the curtains from a street lamp outside. I held still, listened. Nothing. I let out a breath and shifted slightly, about to roll over. Then, tap, just once. Clear. close. Not from inside the room, from the wall, right next to the bed. I froze, the kind of stillness where you don't even want to breathe too loudly. A few seconds passed, then 3 taps again, same spacing, same spot. It sounded like something hitting the outside wall at shoulder height, which didn't make sense. There's no ledge out there, no balcony, nothing anyone could stand on. I turned my head slowly toward the wall, just a blank section of plaster faintly lit. The tapping came again, 3 taps, pause, then 1. I sat up. The moment I did, it stopped, completely. No fading, no trailing sound, just gone. I stayed sitting there, listening. Nothing. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, stood up, walked over to the wall, pressed my hand against it. Cold, solid, no vibration. I stood there for a while, waiting. Then I stepped back. Still nothing. I told myself it had to be something outside, maybe someone in the alley knocking on something, even though the sound felt too close, too direct. I went back to bed, lay down, pulled the covers up, closed my eyes. A few minutes passed, just enough for my body to start relaxing again. Then, tap. I opened my eyes immediately, didn't move this time. The tapping came again. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, same rhythm, same place. I stayed completely still, watching the wall, waiting. The sound didn't change, didn't move, just repeated. Slow, controlled, like someone testing something, or counting. I swallowed, trying to keep my breathing steady. The tapping continued. 3, pause, 3, then a longer pause, then 1, then silence. I waited. Still didn't move. A minute passed, maybe more. Then 2 taps, difforder, closer together. Then nothing. I sat up again, and just like before, the moment I moved, it stopped. I stayed sitting there, heart beating a little faster now. The room felt different, not colder, not warmer, just off, like the air was slightly heavier. I looked toward the window. The curtains were drawn, but not fully. There was a small gap where the streetlight came through. I got up and walked over. Pulled the curtain aside just enough to look out. The alley was empty. Concrete wall opposite. No movement, no one there. I leaned closer to the glass. Nothing. I opened the window a crack. The night air came in. Quiet, no sound at all. I closed it again, went back to bed. This time I didn't lie down right away. I sat there watching the wall, waiting. Nothing happened for a while. Long enough that I started to feel stupid, like I was overreacting to something small. I lay back down. Kept my eyes open. The room stayed still, silent. Minutes passed, then slowly, without warning, tap. I didn't move. The tapping continued. Same pattern as before. 3, pause. 3. I watched the wall closely this time, trying to see if anything moved. Anything at all. There was nothing. No shadow. No shift. Just sound. The tapping went on longer this time. Not louder. Just persistent. Like it was waiting. I stayed completely still. Didn't sit up, didn't speak, just listened. Eventually it stopped on its own. No final tap. No change. Just silence again. I must have drifted off at some point after that. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke up, it was morning. Everything looked normal. Light coming through the curtains. Room exactly as it should be. I got up, checked the wall again. Nothing. No marks, no cracks, no sign of anything. I stepped outside later, walked around to the side of the building, looked up at where my room was. Just flat wall. No pipes, no fixtures, nothing that could have made that sound. That night I went to bed earlier. Told myself I'd ignore it if it happened again. Try not to react. Around the same time, it started. Tap. I kept my eyes closed, didn't move. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. I stayed still, waited. The pattern repeated, then changed slightly. 2 taps, pause, 1, long pause, then nothing. I didn't move for a long time after that. Just lay there, listening. Eventually I sat up, and as soon as I did, it stopped. Now every night when I lie down, I keep still for a while before I move, just to see if it starts again, because whatever was tapping, it only ever stopped when I made it obvious I was awake. And I don't know if that's because it heard me, or because it was waiting for me to notice. I woke up because the room felt wrong. Not noisy, not bright, just off. The kind of feeling where you know something's changed before you even open your eyes. I lay there for a second, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what it was. Then I realized. My alarm hadn't gone off. I always set it for 6:30, same time every weekday. It's loud enough that it usually pulls me straight out of sleep, no matter how tired I am. But that morning, nothing. I grabbed my phone from the bedside table and checked it. 6:47. I frowned, already a bit annoyed at myself for somehow sleeping through it. Then I saw the notification. Alarm dismissed at 2:13 a.m. I just stared at it. That didn't make any sense. I don't wake up at 2 a.m. ever. And even if I did, I wouldn't just turn my alarm off for later that morning. I'd either snooze it or leave it alone. I opened the clock app. The alarm was still set for 6:30. No snooze history. No second alarm. Just the one entry showing it had been dismissed hours earlier. I sat up in bed, trying to think. Maybe I'd woken up briefly and done it without remembering. People do that, right? Turn things off in their sleep. But I didn't feel groggy in that way. I didn't have that disoriented feeling you get when you wake up in the middle of the night. It felt like I'd slept straight through. I checked my phone's activity log. Screen usage showed it had been active around 2:10, a couple of minutes. Then nothing until I picked it up. No apps open, no messages sent, just the alarm being dismissed. I got out of bed and walked into the kitchen, still trying to shake it off. Made coffee, told myself it wasn't a big deal. But something kept bothering me, not just the alarm, the way I'd woken up. That feeling. Like I hadn't just come out of sleep, like I'd come back to it. I tried to ignore it, got ready for work, left the house. Everything felt normal outside, same street, same routine, but I couldn't stop thinking about that timestamp, 2:13 a.m. I checked the camera app on my phone. Sometimes I accidentally open it, nothing. No photos, no videos. I checked my messages, nothing sent. No calls, no notifications around that time except the alarm. It was like the phone had just woken up, turned the alarm off, and gone back to sleep. I got through the day fine. Didn't feel tired. Didn't feel like I'd lost sleep. If anything, I felt more rested than usual, which made it weirder. That night, I went to bed a bit earlier. Set the same alarm, 6:30. I put my phone face down on the bedside table and lay there for a while, staring at the wall, trying not to overthink it. Eventually, I fell asleep. I woke up again in the dark. This time, I didn't know why. No noise, no movement, just suddenly awake. I reached for my phone, 2:12 a.m., almost the same time. I felt that same off feeling again, like something had just happened or was about to. I stayed still, listened. The room was quiet, but not completely. There was a faint shift, not a sound exactly, more like the air had pressure to it, like when your ears need to pop. I swallowed. It didn't go away. I sat up slowly. The moment I moved, the feeling stopped. Just like that, gone. The room felt normal again. I checked my phone. The alarm was still set. Nothing had been dismissed. No notifications. I stayed awake for a bit after that, watching the time. 2:15, 2:20. Nothing else happened. Eventually, I went back to sleep. In the morning, my alarm went off like normal. Loud. Jarring. Exactly how it always does. I grabbed my phone and turned it off. Then I checked the log. No dismissal during the night. Just the one at 6:30. Everything looked normal. But when I unlocked the phone, the battery caught my attention. It was lower than it should have been. Not drained, but noticeably lower. I hadn't used it much the night before. I checked the usage. There was activity again around 2:10, a few minutes, screen on, no apps recorded, no clear reason, just like the previous night. I didn't mention it to anyone, didn't see the point. It sounded like one of those things that doesn't make sense when you say it out loud. But I started doing something different after that. Before going to bed, I'd place my phone a bit further away. Not right next to me, still within reach, just not as close. The next few nights, nothing happened. No early dismissals, no strange wake-ups, everything stayed normal. But every so often I'd wake up before 2:15. Not every night, just occasionally. No reason, no sound, just awake. And every time, there was that same brief moment where the room didn't feel quite right, like I'd interrupted something. I started checking the phone immediately when it happened, watching the screen, waiting, but nothing ever showed. No notifications, no changes, just the normal display. One night I left the phone screen facing me when I went to sleep. Around 2:13, I woke up again. Same feeling, same timing, but this time I saw it. The screen lit up on its own. No sound, just the display turning on for maybe a second, then off again. I grabbed it immediately, unlocked it, checked everything, no alarm, dismissed. No apps open, no logs, just that brief flicker. Now, I don't keep the phone near the bed anymore. I leave it on the desk across the room. The alarm still works, still wakes me up. But sometimes I wake up before it, right around that same time. And even though the phone is across the room, I still get the feeling it's already been touched. I noticed it because the dashboard went dim before anything else changed. Not off, just dimmer, like someone had turned the brightness down a notch without touching anything. I was driving back from visiting my sister. She lives out past a stretch of open farmland, nothing but long, flat fields and the occasional fence line. No houses for miles in some parts. It was late, maybe just after midnight. The road was empty. No streetlights out there, just my headlights cutting through and the sky above. My name's Aaron. I've done that drive plenty of times, so I know how the car usually feels at night. The dashboard lights, the faint glow from the center console, even the way the interior reflects a bit on the windshield. It's all familiar. That's why I noticed it right away. I was about halfway through the open stretch when the interior lights dipped. Subtle, but obvious. The radio display, the speedometer, even the little indicator lights, everything just softened for a few seconds. My first thought was electrical. Battery, maybe. I glanced down at the dashboard. Everything looked normal. No warning lights, no flickering, just dimmer. Then I looked up, and the sky looked wrong. Brighter. Not like dawn, not like moonlight, just lighter than it should have been. The clouds, if there were any, weren't visible, but the darkness itself felt thinner, like the black had been lifted slightly. I slowed down a bit without thinking. The road ahead stayed the same, headlights cutting through, but above, it felt like there was more light than there should be. I checked the mirrors, nothing behind me, no car lights, no distant glow, just darkness. I looked back at the dashboard, still dim. The same reduced brightness. I reached over and adjusted the dial that controls it. It didn't respond, stayed at that lower level. Then, just as suddenly as it had changed, it came back. The interior lights returned to normal brightness, the radio display sharpened, the instrument panel lit up the way it always does, and at the same time, the sky went back to normal. Dark, flat, no strange brightness. I drove a bit further, heart rate slightly up, but nothing too extreme. Told myself it was probably just a brief electrical dip, maybe something with the alternator, but it didn't sit right. I kept going. A few miles down, it happened again. This time, I noticed the sound change first. Not completely, just slightly muffled, like the engine noise had softened. Then the lights dimmed again, same level as before, consistent, not flickering, just lowered. I looked up immediately. The sky had that same brightness, subtle, but unmistakable. The kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. But I was. I slowed down more this time, almost to a crawl. The road stretched ahead, empty. The fields on either side were just dark shapes. But the sky, it felt closer. That's the only way I can describe it. Like it wasn't as far away as it should be. I opened the window slightly. Cold air rushed in. The sound outside didn't change. Still quiet. Still nothing unusual. I stepped on the brake and came to a full stop in the middle of the road. The car idled. The interior lights stayed dim. The sky stayed brighter. I sat there, looking up through the windshield. For a second, I thought I saw something move. Not across the sky, more like within it. A slight shift in the brightness. Then it stopped. The lights inside the car came back. Full brightness. The sky returned to normal. Just like before. I sat there for a while, engine running, not moving, trying to decide if I should get out, but something about the way it felt kept me in the seat, like stepping out wouldn't help. I started driving again, a bit faster this time, just wanting to get through that stretch. The rest of the road felt normal, no more dimming, no change in the sky, everything behaved exactly how it should. By the time I reached the next small town, I'd almost convinced myself it was just a glitch with the car. Maybe the electrical system dipped for a moment, maybe my eyes adjusted weirdly, something explainable. But then I noticed something else. When I pulled into a lit area and parked, I checked the dashboard settings. The brightness dial hadn't moved, still set where I always keep it, and the car didn't show any sign of battery issues, no warning lights, no errors, nothing. A few nights later, I drove that same route again, same time, same conditions. Nothing happened. Everything stayed normal. But now, every time I hit that open stretch, I pay attention to the lights, the sound, the sky. Because when it happened, it wasn't just the car dimming. It was like something outside got brighter, and the car adjusted to it for a moment, before everything went back to how it's supposed to be. I noticed it because it showed up in the glass before I saw anything else. I was walking home late, maybe just past midnight. Not unusual for me. I take the same route most nights. Quiet residential streets, rows of parked cars, a few streetlights spaced out far enough that you're always moving between light and shadow. My name's Darren. I've lived in that area for about 3 years, so I know what it looks like at night. I know which houses leave lights on, which ones don't, where the darker patches are. That's why it stood out. I was halfway down this one long street, terraced houses on both sides, cars parked bumper to bumper, when I noticed the glow in one of the windows. It was faint, kind of pale. At first I thought it was just a TV left on in the front room, but then I saw it again, in another window. Same glow, same color, same intensity. Not coming from inside the house. It was reflecting. I slowed down a bit, looking from one window to the next, the reflections lined up, all catching the same thing. But when I looked up, there was nothing there. Just the sky, clouded over. No stars, no moon, no plane lights, nothing. I stopped walking, turned in a slow circle. The glow was still there in the windows behind me, but not in front. That's what made it feel off. If it was something in the sky, it should have reflected everywhere. But it didn't. Only certain angles, like it was positioned somewhere very specific. I stepped closer to one of the houses, looked directly at the window. The reflection sharpened. It wasn't a shape, more like a patch of dim light, soft around the edges but consistent. I shifted my position slightly. The reflection moved across the glass. That part made sense. But when I looked up again, still nothing. No source, no direction I could point to and say, yeah, it's coming from there. I checked the streetlights, all working normally, yellowish, steady, not the same color as the glow. This was colder, almost gray. I kept walking, slowly, watching how the reflection behaved. It stayed with me, showing up in windows as I passed them, always at about the same height, always just faint enough that if I wasn't paying attention, I might have missed it. I crossed the street, same thing. The windows on the other side picked it up too, but again, only in certain ones, not all. Like the angle had to be just right. I looked at the parked cars. Some of the windows caught it as well. A dull sheen across the glass, but no clear shape, just light. I stopped next to one car and leaned in, trying to get a better look. For a second, I thought I saw something within it. Not a form exactly, just a slight variation, like the glow wasn't completely uniform. Then it shifted. Not across the car window, above. I stepped back and looked up again, still nothing. But I had this feeling, like something had just moved overhead, even though I couldn't see it. I kept walking, a bit faster now. The street stayed quiet, no cars, no people, just the sound of my steps and that faint hum you get in empty areas at night. The glow stayed with me, appearing and disappearing in windows as I passed, sometimes stronger, sometimes barely there, but always present somewhere. I reached the end of the street and turned onto the next one. More houses. More parked cars. The glow followed. Same pattern, same behavior. I started to feel that pressure in my ears. Not painful, just a slight shift, like going up a hill too quickly. I swallowed. It didn't go away. I stopped again, looked around. Nothing had changed visually. But the feeling stayed. I moved forward. The pressure eased slightly. I stopped again. It came back. I tested it a couple more times. Walking, stopping, walking, stopping. It wasn't exact, but it felt connected somehow. Like the movement mattered, like something was reacting to it. I didn't like that thought, so I kept moving. Faster this time, trying not to look at the windows, but I couldn't help it. Every few steps, I glanced. The glow was still there, still tracking, still reflecting. I turned onto my street, shorter, more enclosed, the houses closer together. The reflections got stronger here, more direct, like whatever it was closer. I stopped near my driveway and looked at the window of my own house. The glow was there, clearer than before. For a second, it almost looked like it had depth, like it wasn't just light on glass, but something behind it. I looked up one last time. Nothing, just the same clouded sky. But I had that same feeling again, that something was directly above me. Not high up, not distant, just there. I unlocked my door, went inside, closed it behind me. The moment the door shut, the pressure in my ears disappeared, just gone. I stood in the hallway for a second, listening, everything normal. I walked into the front room, looked out the window again. No glow, just darkness. Streetlight reflections, nothing else. I stayed there for a while, waiting to see if it would come back. It didn't. The next night, I walked the same route, same time, same conditions, no glow, No reflections, nothing unusual. But now, every time I pass those windows, I check. Not the sky, the glass, because whatever that light was, it never showed itself directly, only where it wasn't supposed to be. I noticed it when I shifted my gaze, not when I was staring straight up, but when I looked away. I was out near a reservoir a few miles from town, not a campsite, just a place I go sometimes when I want quiet. There's a gravel turnout, a low fence, and then open water. No streetlights nearby, so the sky actually looks like a sky. It was a clear night, cold but not freezing. No wind, just still. My name's Leon. I'd brought a folding chair and a flask, nothing else. I wasn't doing anything serious, just sitting there, looking up, letting my eyes adjust. You start to see more stars the longer you sit. That's normal. At some point, I picked out one that looked a bit brighter than the rest. Not the brightest in the sky, but noticeable. Slightly off-center from where I was looking. I stared at it for a while, then glanced to the side. And that's when I noticed it. For just a fraction of a second, it didn't move with my vision. Every other star shifted instantly when I moved my eyes. They all stayed fixed in place relative to the sky. But that one, it lagged. Like, it stayed where it had been in my field of view for just a moment longer before snapping into the correct position. I blinked a few times, thinking maybe it was just my eyes adjusting. I focused on a different part of the sky, then moved my gaze again. Same thing. The same star. Lagged behind, not by much. Just enough that I could see it. A tiny delay, like it was catching up. I sat forward in the chair, suddenly more alert. I kept my head still this time, just moving my eyes. Left, right, up, down. Every time I passed over that star, it behaved differently. Everything else stayed fixed. It didn't. It always corrected itself, but not instantly. I told myself it had to be something with my vision. After images, light persistence, something like that. So I tried to test it. I picked two stars close together, one of them being the one I'd noticed, the other just a normal point. I moved my gaze between them, back and forth, back and forth. The normal one stayed consistent. The strange one lagged every time, always the same delay, always that tiny correction after. I stood up, walked a few steps closer to the water, changed my angle, looked up again, same star, same behavior. It wasn't tied to where I was sitting, it wasn't something on the ground, it was in the sky. Or at least, it looked like it was. I started to feel that slight pressure in my ears. Not painful, just noticeable. Like altitude change. I swallowed. It stayed. I kept watching. The star didn't blink, didn't move across the sky like a satellite, just held position, except for that delay when I moved my eyes. I tried moving my whole head instead, slowly turning from side to side. The effect was still there, but less obvious. It was clearer when I moved just my eyes quickly. I sat back down, focused on it again. After a while, I noticed something else. It wasn't just lagging. Sometimes just before it snapped into place, it dimmed slightly, just a fraction, then returned to normal brightness, like it wasn't fully there for a moment. I checked the rest of the sky again. No other stars did that, just this one. I looked around to make sure I wasn't missing something obvious. No planes, no drones, no blinking lights, nothing moving, just a still sky. And that one point that didn't behave like the others. I checked the time on my phone. It had been about 20 minutes since I first noticed it. It hadn't changed position relative to the others in any noticeable way. I stood up again, walked a bit further along the fence, looked up from a slightly different spot. Still there, still lagging. I started to feel uneasy, not scared, just aware, like I was focusing on something I shouldn't be able to notice. I tried to ignore it. Looked at other parts of the sky, counted stars, tracked a faint satellite moving across. Everything else behaved normally. But every time my gaze drifted back, there it was. That same slight delay, that same correction. At one point I closed one eye, then the other. Tested it again. Same result, not tied to one eye. Not a trick of vision. I took a step back from the fence, then another. Still watching it. The pressure in my ears got a little stronger. I could feel my heartbeat more clearly, in my throat, in my ears. I decided to leave, not in a rush, just enough. I folded the chair, packed it up, kept glancing up as I moved. The star stayed visible, still behaving the same way. I got into my car, sat there for a moment, then looked up through the windshield. For a second, I couldn't find it. All the stars looked the same again. I scanned the sky, tried to pick out the exact spot. Nothing stood out. Everything behaved normally. No lag, no dimming, just fixed points of light. I sat there for a while longer, waiting to see if it would happen again. It didn't. I drove home. The sky looked normal the whole way. I didn't think about it much the next day. Told myself it was probably just something with my eyes adjusting to the dark. But a few nights later, I went back. Same spot, same time. Clear sky again. I sat down, waited, let my eyes adjust, then started scanning. It took longer this time, but eventually, I found it again. Same star, same place. And when I shifted my gaze, it lagged, just like before. Now, when I look up at the sky, I don't just see stars. I check how they move when I'm not looking straight at them, because most of them stay exactly where they should, but one of them doesn't keep up. I only noticed it because I scrubbed back too far. I wasn't even looking for anything unusual, just checking the cameras like I do most nights before going to bed. It's become a habit more than anything. Quick glance, make sure nothing's out of place, then shut everything down. My name's Peter. I live on the edge of a small estate, last house before it opens out into fields. Because of that, I put up a couple of cameras. Front drive, back garden. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep an eye on things. That night, everything looked normal at first. Driveway empty, garden still, no movement anywhere. I scrubbed through the footage from earlier that evening just out of routine, skipped through hours in a few seconds. Nothing. Then I went a bit further back. That's when I saw it. Just one frame. Everything in the image looked off, not out of place, just blurred, but not like motion blur. It wasn't streaked in one direction. It was like the entire image had softened at once. Every edge slightly smeared. The fence, the shed, the ground, everything looked like it had shifted without actually moving. I paused it, looked closer, then went forward one frame. Everything snapped back to normal, sharp, clear, exactly how it should be. I went back again, that blurred frame, then forward, normal. I frowned, thinking it was just a glitch in the recording. Cheap camera, after all, but something about it didn't sit right. I played it a few times, back and forth. There was no transition, no gradual blur, just one frame where everything looked like it had moved, and then it hadn't. I checked the timestamp, there was no gap, no skip time, it went from 1 second to the next normally. But that frame didn't match either side. I switched to the front camera, found the same time, scrolled to that exact second. Same thing, one frame, blurred, then normal again. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. It wasn't just one camera glitching, it was both, at the exact same moment. I scrubbed through the rest of the footage. Nothing else like it, just that one instance. I checked earlier days, nothing. Checked the following days, still nothing. Just that one frame where everything looked wrong. I told myself it had to be some kind of sync issue. Maybe the cameras dropped a frame and replaced it with something corrupted, but even that didn't feel quite right. Corrupted frames usually look broken, pixelated, distorted. This didn't. It looked intentional, like something had affected the entire image evenly. I closed the laptop and went to bed. Didn't think much more about it at the time, but the next night I found myself checking the cameras again. More carefully this time, scrolling slower, watching for anything similar. Nothing. Everything stayed normal, sharp, still, until I reached around the same time as the previous night. I slowed down, frame by frame, waiting, watching. Nothing happened. I let out a breath, then leaned back. That's when I noticed something else. The room felt quieter, not silent, just reduced, like the background noise had dropped slightly. I sat there, listening. The fridge in the kitchen usually hums faintly. I couldn't hear it. I stood up, walked into the hallway. Everything looked normal, but the quiet stayed. I opened the back door, stepped outside. The moment I did, the sound came back. Faint wind, distant traffic, normal night noise. I stepped back inside. The quiet returned, not completely silent, just dulled, like something was absorbing the sound. I went back to the laptop, pulled up the live feed. Everything looked normal. I sat there for a minute, then two. Then I noticed it. The image on the screen looked softer. Not as sharp as before, not blurred exactly, just slightly less defined. I leaned closer, trying to see if it was just my eyes. Then, for a split second, it happened again. The same effect as the recorded frame. Everything shifted at once. Edges softened, details smeared, like the image had moved without anything actually moving. Then it snapped back. Clear again. I froze, staring at the screen, waiting for it to happen again. It didn't. I checked the timestamp, no jump, no skip time, just that one moment. I scrubbed back immediately, trying to find it in the recording. But it wasn't there. The footage stayed normal. No blurred frame, nothing. Just a clean sequence. I sat there for a long time after that, watching, waiting, but nothing else happened. Eventually, I shut everything down and went to bed. The next morning, I checked the footage again. Still nothing. No sign of that moment. No blurred frame. Just normal video. Every night when I check the cameras, I don't just look for movement. I watch for that frame. That one instant where everything looks like it's in motion without anything actually changing position. Because I don't think it was the camera that blurred. I think something else did. And the camera just caught it for a fraction of a second before it went back to being invisible. I noticed it when I reeled the line in and the ripples didn't reach me. It was early morning, just after sunrise. Not bright yet, more that gray-blue light you get before the sun really comes up. I'd driven out to a small lake I go to sometimes. Not a popular spot, no proper dock, just a narrow bit of muddy bank and some reeds. My name's Marcus. I fish there maybe once or twice a month when I've got time. It's quiet, usually empty. That morning, I hadn't seen a single car on the way in. The water had a light breeze across it. Nothing strong, just enough to make small ripples moving steadily from left to right. I'd set up near the edge, cast out, and was just standing there watching the line. Everything felt normal. Cold air, damp ground, faint smell of algae. Then I reeled in to check the bait. As I pulled the line back toward me, I noticed something odd. The ripples stopped. Not everywhere, just near me. At first, I thought it was just the angle or something in the water blocking it. But the line came in clean, and as I watched the surface, there was a clear boundary. Out on the lake, the water moved like you'd expect. Small waves, steady motion. But within maybe a 6-foot radius around where I stood, it was completely still, flat, like glass. The ripples reached that edge and just ended. No fading, no gradual change, just stopped. I crouched down slightly, leaning closer to the water. The surface near me reflected perfectly. I could see the sky in it, faintly, like a mirror. But beyond that invisible line, the water kept moving. I tossed a small pebble out, just past the edge. It landed in the rippling water, made a normal splash. Waves spread out from the point where it hit. They moved toward me, then stopped. Right at that same boundary, like they hit something. But there was nothing there. No debris, no oil slick, nothing visible at all. I reached out with the tip of my fishing rod and touched the water just inside the still area. It reacted normally. Small ripples spread out from where the rod touched. But as those ripples moved outward, they stopped at the same invisible line. Didn't cross it, didn't blend, just ended. I stood up slowly, looked around. The rest of the lake behaved normally. Wind moving across it, reeds swaying, nothing else out of place. Just this one patch of still water around me. I took a step back. The still area moved with me. That's when it really started to feel wrong. I stepped forward again. The still water followed, stayed centered on where I was standing, like it wasn't tied to the lake, it was tied to me. I backed away from the edge completely. The still patch pulled back with me, shrinking slightly as I moved onto the bank. Then, once I was far enough from the water, it disappeared. The lake surface went back to normal, ripples all the way to the shore. I stood there for a second, trying to process it. Then I stepped forward again, back to the water's edge. The still patch returned. Same size, same perfect boundary. I could feel my breathing getting a bit uneven. Not panic, just that steady build of unease. I crouched again and looked more closely. The surface inside the still area wasn't just calm. It looked heavier. That's the only word I can think of, like the water was thicker somehow. I dipped my fingers into it. It felt normal, cold, wet, no difference in texture. But when I lifted my hand out, the droplets fell straight down. No splash pattern, no scattering, just straight down into the still surface. I wiped my hand on my jacket and stood up. The wind picked up slightly. I could see the ripples increase out on the lake, but the still area didn't change. It stayed perfectly flat, unaffected. I looked up at the sky. Clouds moving slowly, nothing unusual, but there was that same faint pressure in my ears. Subtle, like altitude change. I swallowed. It didn't go away. I decided to step further back again. Moved up the bank. The still area followed for a moment, then stopped at the water's edge. didn't extend onto land, just held there. Then slowly, it faded, not visually, more like the ripples started to return, soft at first, then fully, until the whole surface looked normal again. I stood there for a while, watching. Nothing else happened. I stepped forward again, no still patch this time, just regular water, wind moving across it, everything as it should be. I cast the line out again, more out of habit than anything, let it sit there. But I couldn't focus on it. I kept watching the surface, waiting for it to happen again. It didn't. After about 20 minutes, I packed up and left. The drive back felt normal. No strange sensations, no pressure, nothing out of place. But now, whenever I go back there, I don't just watch the line, I watch the water closest to me. Because for those few minutes, it didn't move the way water should. And it didn't seem like the lake had changed, just the part that was around me. I noticed it because the fog was moving around it. It was early morning, just before sunrise. I was driving back from dropping my brother off at the airport, cutting through a back road I don't usually take. It's one of those narrow country roads with hedges on both sides and no proper lighting. The fog had rolled in pretty thick. Not so bad you couldn't drive, but enough that everything outside the headlights looked flat and gray. The beam just sort of stopped a few meters ahead, like it hit a wall. My name's Lewis. I've driven in fog plenty of times, so I wasn't too bothered at first, just slowed down a bit and kept steady. The road was empty, no cars coming the other way, no lights behind me, just the engine and the faint hiss of tires on damp asphalt. After a few minutes, I started noticing how the fog moved. It wasn't still. It drifted slowly, like a current passing through it. You could see it shift across the beam of the headlights, thin out, then thicken again. That's when I saw the gap. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a slightly darker patch ahead where the fog looked thinner. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't thinning. It was avoiding something. There was a shape in the road where the fog didn't settle, not completely clear. Just less dense, like the fog parted around it. I slowed down more, trying to figure out what I was looking at. It wasn't moving, just sitting there in the road ahead. Roughly the height of a person, maybe a bit taller, but the edges weren't clear enough to say for sure. The headlights hit it, but they didn't reflect off anything solid. Instead, the light seemed to bend slightly around it. That's the only way I can describe it. Like the beam shifted, just a little, as it passed through that area. I kept driving, slowly. The shape stayed in the same place, didn't react, didn't change, just that same empty patch in the fog. As I got closer, I tried to make out more detail. There was no outline, no clear edge, just a zone where the fog didn't behave the same way. It didn't swirl into it, didn't pass through it. It just went around. I felt my grip tighten on the steering wheel without really thinking about it. I checked the road surface. No debris, no object I could see, nothing that would physically block the fog like that. I was maybe 10 meters away at that point. Close enough that I should have been able to see something definite. But I couldn't. The shape didn't resolve into anything solid. It just stayed, absent. Like something was there, but not visible in the way it should be. Then, the fog shifted. A thicker wave it rolled through from the left side of the road. For a second, it covered everything. The shape disappeared completely. Just uniform gray in the headlights. I slowed even more, almost to a stop, waiting for the fog to thin again. It did. But the shape was gone. Nothing in the road, no gap, no distortion, just normal fog drifting the way it had been before. I sat there for a second, engine idling, looking straight ahead, half expecting it to come back. It didn't. I moved forward slowly, passing the spot where I'd seen it. There was nothing there. No marks on the road, no change in the surface, nothing in the hedges on either side. Just empty road and fog. I kept driving, trying to shake it off, telling myself it was just the way the fog had moved, some weird pocket of air or temperature difference. But it didn't feel like that, because it hadn't moved with the fog. It had stayed fixed in place. I drove for another few minutes. The fog stayed thick, but normal. No more gaps, no more shapes. Then I noticed something else. The fog ahead started to thin slightly. Not everywhere, just in a narrow stretch across the road. For a moment, I thought I was seeing it again. That same absence. I slowed down again, heart picking up, but this time it didn't hold its shape. The fog drifted through it normally, no resistance, no clear boundary, just a brief thinning that passed as quickly as it came. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Kept driving. Eventually, the fog started to lift as the sky got lighter. So close? By the time I reached the main road, everything looked normal again, clear enough to see properly. Traffic starting to pick up, nothing out of the ordinary. But later that day, I kept thinking about how the fog had behaved. Not just the gap, but the way it had moved around that space. Like there was something there it couldn't pass through. Not visible, not solid in any normal sense. Just present enough to affect it. And when the fog covered it for that second, it didn't feel like it had gone away. Just like I couldn't see where it was anymore. I noticed it because the sky didn't brighten the way it's supposed to. I was already awake. Couldn't sleep, so I'd gone downstairs and made coffee, then ended up standing by the back door looking out over the fields behind the house. It's pretty open where I live, just a long stretch of land with a few hedges and nothing blocking the horizon. My name's Owen. I've lived here a few years, so I know exactly how the light usually comes in before sunrise. It's gradual. You get that faint glow along the horizon, then it spreads, lifting everything out of the dark evenly. That morning, it didn't. At first, I thought I was just early. The sky was still dark, but not fully. That gray-blue tone had started to creep in, the kind that tells you dawn's close. I took a sip of coffee, just watching it. Then I saw the first patch. It wasn't on the horizon, it was higher up. A soft area of brightness, maybe the size of a large cloud, but there weren't any clouds there. It didn't look like light shining through something. It looked like the sky itself was brighter in that spot. I frowned and leaned closer to the glass. The rest of the sky stayed the same. Dark, even, consistent. But that one area was lighter. I waited, expecting it to spread. It didn't. It just stayed there. Then another patch appeared, off to the right this time. Same kind of brightness, same size, roughly. Not connected to the first one. Just separate. I set the mug down on the counter and opened the door. Stepped outside. The air was cold, still. No wind at all. I looked up. Now there were 3 patches, each one faintly glowing, none of them touching, none of them moving like clouds. They weren't drifting, they weren't expanding, just existing. I walked a few steps out into the yard. The grass crunched slightly under my shoes from the cold. I kept my eyes on the sky, trying to figure out what I was looking at. Maybe thin cloud cover catching early light? But the horizon was still dark. There was no source for the light yet. No gradual increase from one direction. Just those isolated areas. Then one of them dimmed. Not faded slowly, just reduced, like someone had turned the brightness down. It didn't disappear completely, just became less noticeable. The others stayed the same. I turned slightly, tracking them. Another one appeared, further left. Same kind of glow, same size. Now there were 4, spread out unevenly across the sky. I tried to see if there was any pattern, any alignment. There wasn't. They looked random, but they all had the same intensity, the same soft, diffuse edge. I noticed then that the ground hadn't changed. The fields were still dark, the hedges were still silhouettes. None of that light was reaching down. It was only in the sky. I stepped further out, away from the house, trying to get a wider view. The patches stayed in place. They didn't follow me, didn't shift relative to my position. They were fixed in the sky. Then one of them moved, not across the sky, just repositioned, like it blinked into a slightly different spot. There was no motion between the 2 points, no trail, just there, then there. I blinked a couple of times, thinking I'd imagined it, but then another one did the same thing, a small jump. Not far, but enough to notice. That's when it started to feel wrong. Not just unusual, wrong, because nothing in the sky moves like that. Not clouds, not light, nothing. I stood there watching, my breath visible in front of me now. The patches stayed for a while longer, then one by one they started to dim. Not all at once, individually, each one fading at a slightly different pace. The first one I'd seen was the last to go. It lingered longer than the others, still faintly glowing while the rest had nearly vanished. Then it too dimmed, until the sky was back to a uniform gray-blue. The horizon began to brighten normally after that, slow, even spread of light. Exactly how it should be. I stayed out there until the sun actually came up, watching the sky carefully. Nothing else happened. Everything looked normal. But the thing that stuck with me was how separate those patches had been. Like the sky wasn't lighting up as a whole, just in pieces. And whatever caused it, it didn't follow the usual direction of sunrise. It just stopped before it became one. I noticed it before I even opened my eyes. The room felt wrong. Not freezing, not breath visible cold or anything like that, just colder than it should have been. Enough that it cut through the blanket and made me shift a bit in bed. I remember lying there for a second, still half asleep, trying to figure out what had woken me. That's when I realized the air didn't feel still. It wasn't a breeze exactly. More like movement. Subtle, but there. Like the air in the room had just been disturbed and hadn't settled yet. My name's Daniel. I live alone in a small semi-detached house. Nothing unusual about it. Heating works fine, windows are solid, no drafts I've ever noticed. That morning, or I guess it was still night, I just lay there, eyes closed, trying to make sense of it. The temperature difference was clear. My arms, where they were outside the blanket, felt noticeably colder than usual, but my chest and legs, under the covers, were still warm. It didn't feel like the whole room had cooled down, just parts of it. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, but not pitch black. There's a street light outside that always leaks a bit of light through the curtains. Everything looked normal at first. Wardrobe, door, desk, nothing out of place. But the air still felt off. I pushed the blanket back and sat up. That's when I felt it more clearly. A slight shift, like the air moved past my face. Not strong enough to move anything visible, but enough to feel. I turned toward the window. Closed. Curtains drawn. No gap. I got out of bed and walked over to it anyway. Ran my hand along the edge. Nothing. No draft. The glass felt cold, but that's normal. I stood there for a second, listening. The house was quiet. No pipes, no heating kicking in, no outside noise. Just that strange, subtle feeling like the air wasn't settled. I turned back toward the bed. That's when I noticed the temperature difference again. The side of the room near the door felt normal. Not warm, just what you'd expect. But closer to the bed, especially where I'd been lying, it was colder. Not dramatically, just enough that it stood out. I walked back slowly, paying attention. Each step, the temperature shifted slightly, like I was crossing an invisible boundary. I stopped beside the bed, held my hand out. There was a clear point where the air felt cooler. I moved my hand back and forth through that space. Warm, cool, warm, cool. No gradual change, just a line. I frowned, trying to make sense of it. Maybe something with the heating? But it didn't explain the movement I'd felt, or why it was so localized. I sat back down on the edge of the bed. The mattress still held some warmth, but the air around it didn't. I reached down and touched the floor. Same as always. No difference. I stood up again and walked toward the door. The temperature evened out. Normal. I turned around and stepped back. The cooler air returned as I crossed that same invisible point. I stood there for a bit, just testing it. Back and forth, same result every time. Then I noticed something else. The air wasn't just cooler, it felt recently moved. That's the only way I can explain it. Like when someone walks past you quickly and you feel the air shift in their wake, except there was no one there. I looked around the room again, more carefully this time. Everything was in place, nothing knocked over, nothing disturbed, but something about the space near the bed felt used. I don't know how else to put it, like something had just been there. Not physically visible, just present enough to affect the air. I stepped back again out of that cooler area. The feeling dropped off immediately. The rest of the room felt still, normal. I stood there watching the bed, waiting. Nothing moved, nothing changed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I'd woken up a few seconds earlier, I would have caught something, not seen it clearly. Just been aware of it before it was gone. I went to the door, opened it. The hallway felt completely normal, warmer, still. No sign of anything unusual. I walked into the bathroom, splashed some water on my face, trying to wake up properly. When I came back, the room felt different. The cooler area had faded. The temperature was even again. No clear boundary anymore, just a normal bedroom. I stood there in the doorway for a minute, looking at the bed. Nothing stood out. No reason to think anything had happened. But the feeling lingered. That something had disturbed the air. Not a draft. Not something explainable. Just a presence that had been there long enough to leave a trace, and then gone before I fully woke up. The power went out just after midnight. It wasn't gradual, everything just dropped at once. The TV cut, the fridge stopped humming, and the house went quiet in a way that felt heavier than normal silence. I sat there for a second, waiting for it to come back. Sometimes it flickers out here, especially in bad weather. But this night was still. No wind, no rain, just a clear sky from what I'd seen earlier. My name's Ryan. I live in a small coastal town, a bit outside the main area. When the power goes, it really goes. No streetlights, no glow from nearby houses, just dark. I got up and went to the window, pulled the curtain back slightly. The street was completely black. A couple of houses down, I could see silhouettes where windows should have been, but no lights anywhere. That's when I noticed the clouds. At first, I thought it was just my eyes adjusting. There was a faint glow behind them. Not lightning, not flashing, just something dim, moving slowly. It wasn't bright enough to light anything below. The ground stayed dark, the houses stayed black, but the clouds themselves looked slightly illuminated from behind. I leaned closer to the window, trying to get a better look. The glow wasn't spreading across the sky like lightning does. It stayed contained, a soft, circular area of light drifting behind the cloud layer, slow, smooth, no sudden changes in direction. I opened the front door and stepped outside. The air felt still, maybe a bit cooler than before, but nothing extreme. No sound, no distant generators, no cars, nothing. Just quiet. I looked up again. The glow was still there, moving. Not fast enough to track easily, but definitely shifting position. What stood out was how it didn't behave like anything I'd seen before. If it was behind the clouds, it should have lit them unevenly depending on thickness, but it didn't. The clouds above it all had the same faint brightness, like the light wasn't being blocked or scattered the way it should be. I walked a few steps out onto the street. Other houses were still dark. No one else outside. I wondered if anyone else was seeing it. I pulled my phone out. No signal. Battery was fine, but I couldn't get anything to load. I tried taking a picture anyway. The screen just showed darkness. No glow. No cloud detail, just black. I lowered the phone and looked up again. The glow was still there, clear as before. It had moved further across the sky now, drifting behind a thicker patch of cloud. But the brightness didn't change, still that same soft, even light. I started noticing something else. There was no sound at all. Not just quiet, empty. Usually, even at night, you get something. Wind, insects, distant waves. But it felt like everything had dropped out, like the environment had been muted. I took a few more steps forward. The glow continued its slow movement. At one point, it paused, or at least it seemed to. Just hung there behind the clouds, not shifting. Then it started moving again, in a slightly different direction. Not a sharp turn, just adjusted, like it changed its mind. I felt that pressure in my ears then, subtle but noticeable, like when you go up in elevation. I swallowed, trying to clear it. It stayed. I looked around again. Still no lights anywhere, no sign of the power coming back. The glow drifted closer to being directly overhead. I stood there, watching it, trying to make sense of it. It didn't pulse, didn't flicker, just moved. Steady and quiet. Then, for a brief moment, the clouds thinned slightly, not enough to see through them completely, but enough that I expected to see something more defined behind the glow. There was nothing, no shape, no object, just that same even light. And then it started to fade. Not disappear instantly, just reduce. Slowly, like it was being turned down. The movement continued for a few seconds after the brightness started dropping. Then it stopped. The glow shrank slightly, then vanished completely. The clouds went back to looking like normal dark shapes against the sky. The pressure in my ears eased off. The silence lifted. I could hear faint wind again. Distant, but there. A few seconds later, a light flicked on in one of the houses down the street. Then another. The power came back in stages. My porch light turned on behind me. I stepped back inside. The house felt normal again. Appliances humming back to life. Everything as it should be. I went back to the window and looked up. The sky was clear now. No glow, no sign of anything unusual. Just clouds drifting slowly like they always do. But the thing that stuck with me wasn't just the light. It was how it didn't affect anything else. No illumination on the ground. No reflection on surfaces. Just existing behind the clouds, visible but not interacting with anything the way light should. I noticed it because nothing around it lit up. I was driving back from a late shift, taking one of those long rural roads that cut through open farmland. It was just after midnight, maybe closer to 1. No streetlights, no houses close to the road, just fields on either side and the occasional fence line. My headlights were the only real light out there. Everything beyond them was just darkness. I'd been on that road for about 10 minutes when I saw it. At first, it looked like a faint glow off to the right, just past the edge of the field. Dim, low to the ground. I slowed slightly, trying to figure out what it was. It didn't look like a house light. Too low, too contained, and it wasn't lighting anything around it. That's what stood out. The ground near it stayed completely dark. No reflection, no spread. Just that small, soft glow sitting there. I eased off the accelerator a bit more, the car rolling forward quietly. The glow stayed in the same place relative to the field. Didn't move, didn't flicker. I glanced at the road ahead, then back toward it. Still there, same brightness, same position. I told myself it was probably something on the ground, a piece of equipment, a light from a farm building further back. But it didn't behave like light should. It didn't touch anything, didn't reveal any shapes, just existed. I slowed almost to a crawl, the headlights sweeping further along the road. The glow stayed just outside their reach. I leaned slightly toward the passenger side, trying to get a better angle. Still no detail, just a soft circular patch, hovering. I checked the time on the dashboard, 12:58. I remember that clearly. I looked back at the glow, and that's when it moved, not sideways, not drifting. Up, straight up, smooth, slow at first, then a bit faster. I froze, foot hovering over the brake, watching it. The glow lifted from the level of the field, rising into the air. Still not lighting anything around it, still just that contained shape. I pressed the brake lightly. The car slowed to a near stop. The glow kept rising. No sound, no change in brightness, just moving upward. I leaned forward slightly, trying to keep it in view through the windshield. The angle shifted as it climbed. The stars behind it stayed visible, unchanged. It didn't block them, didn't distort them, it just moved in front of them. Or maybe behind. I couldn't tell. I felt a faint pressure in my ears then. Subtle, like a slight shift in altitude. I swallowed. It didn't go away. The glow kept rising, higher now, above the height of any trees or buildings. Still perfectly steady. No flicker, no pulse, just there. Then it began to fade, not quickly. Gradually, the same way it had been when I first saw it. Dim, contained, but now getting fainter. As it climbed, I kept watching, trying to hold on to it. The pressure in my ears increased slightly. The silence around me felt heavier. No wind, no distant sounds, just the engine idling quietly. The glow got smaller, not shrinking exactly, just harder to see, blending into the dark. Until it was gone. No snap, no sudden disappearance, just faded completely. I sat there for a few seconds, staring at the spot where it had been. Nothing, just empty sky. The stars looked normal again, unchanged. I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. The pressure in my ears eased. The quiet lifted slightly. I could hear faint sounds again, distant, normal. I checked the time, 1:02. That didn't feel right. It felt like less time had passed. I looked back toward the field. Nothing there. No glow. No sign anything had been there at all. I waited for a minute, engine idling, watching. Nothing changed. Eventually, I pressed the accelerator and kept driving. Didn't stop again. Didn't look back. The rest of the road felt normal. The darkness behaved the way it should. My headlights lit the ground. Everything made sense again. I got home around 1:15, parked the car, sat there for a moment before getting out, looked up at the sky. Nothing unusual, no glow, no movement, just stars. I went inside, locked the door, tried to sleep, didn't sleep much. The next night I drove that same road again, same time, same conditions. I slowed down as I reached that stretch, looked out across the field. Nothing. No glow, no movement, everything normal. But now, every time I pass that spot, I find myself glancing out into the darkness, just to see if something's hovering there again that doesn't light anything. It should. I noticed the compass first because it didn't just wobble. It kept turning like it couldn't decide where north was. I was hiking a ridge trail I'd done a couple of times before, nothing extreme. Just a long stretch of elevated ground with a clear view on both sides. You could see miles out if the weather held up. That morning had started clear, but by the time I reached the higher part of the ridge, a thin layer of cloud had rolled in. Not thick fog, just enough to dull the distance and flatten the light. It was early afternoon, maybe around 2 p.m. I'd stopped for a break, sat on a flat rock, and pulled out my compass mostly out of habit. I like checking bearings even when the trail is obvious. At first it looked normal. The needle pointed north. Steady. Then it shifted, just slightly. I frowned and tilted it, thinking maybe I wasn't holding it level. The needle moved again, not snapping like it should, just drifting. Slowly, I straightened it carefully in my hand, held it still. The needle kept moving, not spinning, just sliding a few degrees one way, then back, then slightly further the other direction, like it couldn't settle. I tapped the side lightly. Sometimes that helps if it sticks. It didn't change anything. The needle continued that slow, uncertain movement. I looked up from it. The ridge stretched out ahead, fading slightly into the haze. Everything looked normal. No movement. No reason for interference. I checked my phone. No signal. Not unusual. I switched it to compass mode. That spun too, more quickly than the physical one, like it was trying to correct itself but couldn't. I turned in place slowly. Both readings shifted, but not in a way that matched my movement. That's when I felt it. A faint pressure in my ears. Subtle at first, like a small change in altitude. I swallowed. It didn't clear. I stood up from the rock, looked around more carefully. The air felt heavier, not thick, just weighted, like something had settled over the area. I slipped the compass back into my hand and held it out in front of me. The needle drifted again, further this time, then paused, then drifted back. I started walking along the ridge again, slow at first, watching the ground, then the compass, then the horizon, trying to figure out if I was just imagining it. The trail was still clear, easy to follow, but the compass kept pulling my attention. Every time I glanced down, it was pointing in somewhere slightly different, not wildly off, enough to feel wrong. After a few minutes, I stopped again. The pressure in my ears had increased slightly. I swallowed again. Still there. The silence around me had changed too. The usual sounds, wind brushing across the ridge, distant birds, felt reduced. Not gone, just quieter than they should have been. I turned slowly, scanning the distance. That's when I saw it. Far out, beyond the ridgeline. A faint glow, low on the horizon, barely visible through the haze. I might have missed it if I hadn't been looking. It wasn't bright. Just a soft, dim light. Small. I stared at it for a few seconds, trying to figure out what it could be. A reflection? A distant building? But it didn't match anything I knew was out there. It sat there, steady, unmoving. I took a few steps forward along the trail. The glow stayed in place, didn't shift with my movement. I checked the compass again. The needle had drifted further now, pointing somewhere off to the side, not north, not anything consistent. I looked back at the glow. It pulsed once, not flashing, not blinking, just a single, soft increase in brightness. Then back to normal. I felt my chest tighten slightly, that creeping feeling that something wasn't lining up. I stood there, watching, waiting to see if it would pulse again. It didn't. The glow stayed faint, steady. I checked the time on my phone, 2:17 p.m. I remember that clearly. I looked back up. The glow hadn't changed, but something else had. The air felt heavier again. The pressure in my ears deepened slightly. I shifted my stance, looked. A ridge felt off. Hard to explain, like the space around me had flattened slightly. The distance didn't look quite right. I looked down at the compass again. The needle had stopped, but it wasn't pointing anywhere that made sense. It just sat there, locked in a direction I knew wasn't north. I tapped it again. Nothing. No movement. I turned slowly in place. The needle didn't follow. It stayed fixed. That's when the glow faded, same way it had appeared. No movement, no change in position, just slowly losing brightness, until it was gone. I stood there for a few seconds, watching the empty space. The pressure in my ears eased slightly. The air felt lighter. The normal sounds started to return. Wind first, then distant movement. Everything slowly coming back. I looked down at the compass again. The needle shifted, snapped back toward north, steady, like nothing had happened. I checked the time again, 2:21. That didn't feel right. It felt like more time had passed, or less. I couldn't tell. I stayed there for a bit longer, trying to decide if I should keep going or head back. Everything looked normal again. The trail was clear, the air felt right, but something about it stayed with me. I ended up finishing the hike. Didn't see anything else. The compass worked fine the rest of the way. No drifting, no issues. But now, whenever I'm out on a trail, I check the compass more often than I used to, just to make sure it still knows which way north is supposed to be. I noticed it because it didn't stop when I unplugged everything. It started late, just after midnight. I was in the living room half watching something on TV, half scrolling on my phone. Nothing unusual about the night. No wind outside, no rain, just quiet. Then I heard it, a low hum. Not loud, not sharp, just a steady, low-frequency sound like something electrical running in the background. At first, I didn't think much of it. Houses make noise. Fridges, boilers, wiring, there's always something. But this didn't feel like it was coming from a specific place. It felt like it was just there, filling the space. I muted the TV, the hum stayed. I sat there for a second, listening more carefully. It didn't change, didn't rise or fall, just steady. I got up and walked into the kitchen. Fridge was running. I opened it. The hum didn't change. I unplugged it. The fridge clicked off. The hum stayed exactly the same. That's when I paused, because that should have affected it, even a little. I stood there, just listening. The sound didn't get louder or quieter when I moved. It didn't seem directional. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I walked back into the living room. Still there. Same volume, same tone. I turned off the lights. No change. I checked the boiler. Still running, but when I switched it off, the hum stayed, unchanged. That didn't make sense. I stood in the hallway for a moment, trying to figure it out. It wasn't coming from outside. It didn't have that distant quality. It felt internal, like it was inside the walls or inside the space itself. I went upstairs. The hum followed, same volume, same tone. Didn't get quieter the further I moved from anything electrical. I stepped into the bedroom, closed the door behind me, still there. I sat on the edge of the bed, listened. The sound didn't echo, didn't bounce. It just existed. Flat. Constant. I felt a slight pressure in my ears then, subtle, like when you're in a lift. I swallowed. The pressure stayed. I stood up again, walked back downstairs. The hum hadn't changed at all. I checked my phone. 12:18 a.m. I remember that clearly. I stood in the middle of the living room, just listening, trying to figure out if it was louder than before. It wasn't, but it felt closer, like I was more aware of it. I went to the front door, opened it, stepped outside. The hum stopped instantly. No fade, no reduction, just gone. The night air felt normal, cool, quiet. I could hear distant traffic again, a dog barking somewhere far off, everything how it should be. I stood there for a few seconds, then stepped back inside. The hum was there immediately, same volume, same tone, like I'd stepped back into it. I closed the door behind me. The pressure in my ears returned. I stood still, trying to pinpoint it. I walked slowly around the room. The sound didn't shift, didn't follow, didn't lead. It was just everywhere. I went back outside. Again, it stopped instantly. Silence. Normal. Back inside, it returned. No transition, no change. Just there. I did this a few times, in and out. Same result every time. I started to feel uneasy then. Not scared, just unsettled, because there was no source, nothing I could identify. I went upstairs again. The hum followed. Same consistency. I lay down on the bed just to see if it changed. It didn't. If anything, it felt more noticeable lying still. The pressure in my ears increased slightly. I closed my eyes. The hum didn't change. I opened them again. Checked the time, 12:23. That didn't feel right. It felt like more time had passed. I sat up. The sound continued, uninterrupted. I went back downstairs, opened the door again, stepped outside. Silence, immediate, clean. I stood there longer this time, letting the normal sound settle. Then I went back in. The hum returned. But this time, it felt different. Not louder, just closer, more present, like it had shifted slightly. I stood in the hallway, listening. The pressure in my ears deepened for a moment, then held. I didn't stay inside much longer after that. I grabbed my keys, stepped outside, closed the door behind me. The silence outside felt heavier now, more noticeable. I stood on the pavement for a bit, then walked down the street, just to put some distance between me and the house. Everything outside felt normal. No hum, no pressure. I stayed out for maybe 20 minutes, then went back. Stood at the front door for a moment, listening. Nothing. I unlocked it, opened the door, stepped inside. The hum was gone, completely. No trace of it. The house felt normal again. Quiet. Still. I walked through each room. Nothing unusual, no sound, no pressure, everything back to how it should be. I checked the time, 12:41. That didn't match what I expected. It felt like I'd been outside longer. I stood in the living room for a while, just listening. Nothing. Eventually, I went to bed. Slept normally after that. The next day, everything was fine. No hum, no issues. I checked the appliances, everything working, no problems. But now, sometimes late at night, when the house gets really quiet, I find myself listening for that low hum, just to see if it's there again. I heard it before I noticed anything else. I was about halfway through my usual loop, just walking the long path that cuts behind the housing estate and runs along the edge of the fields. It was late, maybe just after 11. Warm night, no wind, that kind of still air where sound carries further than it should. At first, I thought it was someone's alarm going off in the distance. A faint tone rising and falling, not loud, just enough to catch your attention. I stopped walking and listened. It wasn't coming from any direction I could pin down. Not from the houses, not from the road behind me. It felt like it was above me somehow, but when I looked up, there was nothing there. Just a clear sky, a few stars, no planes, no clouds. The sound dipped lower, then rose again. Slow, steady, like a sine wave, if that makes sense. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds before I started walking again. Figured it was just something carrying weird through the air. Happened sometimes at night, but as I kept going, the sound didn't fade. It stayed with me. Not louder, not quieter. Just there. Like it was keeping pace. That's when it started to feel off. I slowed down a bit and listened again. The tone shifted slightly, climbing higher, then dropping back down. No rhythm I could follow exactly, but it wasn't random either. I looked up again, still nothing. I even turned in a full circle, trying to figure out if it got louder in any direction. It didn't. That's when I pulled my phone out, thinking maybe I could record it. I opened the voice recorder, held it up, waited a few seconds. I could hear it clearly with my own ears, but when I played it back, there was nothing. Just the faint sound of my footsteps and some distant traffic. I tried again, same result. I put my phone away and kept walking. The path bends slightly to the right, about 100 meters ahead, where it dips down a bit closer to the fields. There's no streetlights there, just darkness on either side. As I got closer to that part, the tone changed. It got tighter, I guess. The rise and fall became sharper, more noticeable. I stopped again, right at the edge of the bend, and for the first time I felt it as well as heard it. Not in a dramatic way, just a faint pressure in my ears, like when you go up a hill too fast. I swallowed, trying to clear it. Didn't help. The sound dipped low, almost out of hearing range, then climbed higher than before. I looked straight up. Nothing. But I had this weird sense that if I focused hard enough, I'd see something. Like it was just out of reach. I stood there longer than I should have. The longer I stayed still, the more noticeable the sound became. Not louder, just clearer, like my brain was tuning into it. I started feeling uneasy at that point. Not scared, just that quiet kind of discomfort where things don't line up. So I kept moving. As I rounded the bend, the path opened up a bit. Fields on both sides, no fences, just long grass stretching out into darkness. That's when I noticed the lights. Not in the sky, on the ground. Small points of light scattered across the field to my left. Faint, like reflections or something catching the moonlight. Except there wasn't much moon. I slowed down again, staring out into the field. The lights didn't move, they just sat there, spaced out unevenly, and the tone, it seemed to match them somehow. Every time the pitch rose, the lights got slightly brighter. When it dropped, they dimmed. It wasn't dramatic. You had to really pay attention to see it. But once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. I stepped off the path slightly onto the grass. The moment I did, the tone shifted, sharper, higher. The pressure in my ears increased just a bit. I stopped. The lights in the field flickered. Not blinking, just a quick, uneven change. I took a step back onto the path. The tone dropped again. The lights steadied. I stood there, trying to process that. It felt like the sound and the lights were reacting to where I was. I didn't like that. I stayed on the path and kept walking, faster now. The tone followed. Always above, always out of sight. As I got further along, I noticed something else. My footsteps sounded wrong. Not louder or quieter, but just slightly delayed. Like there was a fraction of a second between my foot hitting the ground and the sound reaching me. I tested it by stomping harder. Same thing. That tiny delay. I stopped completely. The tone kept going. I clapped my hands once, the sound came back just slightly late. That was enough for me. I turned around, decided I'd just head back the way I came. As soon as I did, the tone changed again. Lower this time, and slower, like it was stretching out. I walked faster, didn't run, but close to it. The lights in the field stayed where they were, but I had this feeling they were watching, not in a literal sense. Just that same sense you get when you know something's focused on you. Halfway back to the houses, the tones started to fade. Not all at once, just gradually dropping out. The pressure in my ears eased. My footsteps sounded normal again. I slowed down, turned around one last time. The field was dark, no lights, no sound, just the path and the distant glow of streetlights. I stood there for a bit, listening. Nothing. I walked home after that, locked the door, didn't go back out. The next day I went back during daylight. Same path, same field. There's nothing out there. No markers, no equipment, nothing that would reflect light like that. Just grass. I even stepped off the path again, stood roughly where I had the night before. Nothing happened. No sound, no lights. Everything felt normal. But now, whenever I'm out late, I catch myself listening for that tone. Sometimes I think I hear the start of it, just faint enough that I can't be sure. And I always look up when I do, even though I know I won't see anything. I first noticed it because it stopped just short of my shoes. I was lying on my back, half awake, just staring at the ceiling like you do when you're not fully asleep, but not really thinking either. It was early morning, still dark outside, that quiet time where nothing's moving yet. My alarm wasn't due for another hour. There was this faint line of light moving across the wall to my left. At first, I thought it was a car passing by. Happens all the time. Headlights through the blinds, slow sweep across the room. But this didn't look like that. It was too straight, too clean. It looked like a thin band, maybe a few inches wide, stretching from one side of the wall to the other. And it was moving slowly downward, like something scanning. I didn't move. I just watched it. It passed over a picture frame, and the glass caught it for a second, reflected it across the ceiling in a sharp line. That's when I realized it wasn't coming through the window the way headlights usually do. The angle was wrong. It kept moving down, not fast, not slow either, just steady. And then it stopped, right above the floor, just above where my shoes were by the wall. It stayed there for maybe 2 seconds. Then it faded out. Not like it moved away, it just dimmed until it was gone. I lay there for a bit, waiting for it to happen again. Nothing. I checked my phone. 5:12 a.m. I almost got up to look outside, but I didn't want to fully wake myself up before work. I told myself it was probably just some weird reflection. Maybe a car turning somewhere down the street. I went back to sleep. The next morning, I forgot about it until it happened again. Again. Same time, almost exactly. I woke up without knowing why, rolled slightly onto my side, and there it was again. That band of light, higher up on the wall this time, moving down. Same motion, same speed. I pushed myself up on one elbow and watched it more closely. It didn't flicker or shake like headlights. It was completely smooth. When it reached the same spot near the floor, it paused again, then disappeared. I sat there for a few seconds, listening. No cars, no sound at all. I got out of bed that time and went to the window. Street was empty. No movement, no headlights, nothing turning corners. Just a couple parked cars and the same streetlight that's always been there. I even looked at the houses opposite. No one had lights on. I went back to bed, but I didn't really sleep after that. Later that day, I mentioned it to my neighbor, Mark, while we were both out front. He shrugged it off, said it was probably a delivery van or something passing early. I told him the angle didn't make sense, and he just laughed and said I was overthinking it. I tried to leave it at that, but it kept happening. Not every morning, but enough that I started waking up just before it. I don't know how to explain that part. It wasn't like I set an alarm. I just opened my eyes, checked the time. 5:10, 5:11, and then a minute later, the light would appear. Always the same wall, always moving down, always stopping before the floor. I started paying more attention to the room. One morning, I noticed something else. The air looked off. Not in a big way, just near the light. As it moved, there was this faint shimmer around it, like heat rising off a road in summer. Subtle, but it was there. And it wasn't anywhere else in the room. I reached out toward it once. Didn't touch it exactly, just held my hand in the path. The light passed over my fingers. I expected to feel something. Warmth, maybe, nothing. But for a second, I couldn't see my hand properly, like it blurred out while the light was on it. Then it was gone. That's when I started feeling uneasy about it. I checked outside again that morning, but this time I stayed by the window longer. Nothing. No cars went by, no lights shifted. Everything outside stayed completely still. The next time it happened, I decided to test something. I moved my shoes. They'd been in the same spot every time, right where the light stopped. So I kicked them further into the room before going to sleep. When I woke up and saw the light again, I watched closely as it moved down the wall. It didn't stop where it used to. It kept going, all the way to the floor this time. Then it faded out like before. I sat up straight at that point, because the only thing that had changed was where the shoes were. The next morning, I moved something else. A chair. Pulled it slightly away from the wall. Same result. The light went all the way down again. No pause. It felt like it had been stopping at something before. That idea stuck with me more than I liked. I started leaving the room exactly the same every night. Same layout, same things against the wall, and sure enough, when everything was in its usual place, the light stopped early again, right above the floor, right where the shoes were. It didn't make sense. A few days after that, something else happened. I woke up, like usual, just before it started. But this time, it didn't appear on the wall. It was on the ceiling. Same kind of band, same steady movement, but it was sliding across the ceiling toward me. I froze. It moved slowly, inching closer until it reached directly above the bed. Then it stopped. I could see the shimmer more clearly up there, like the air itself was being disturbed. The light didn't fade right away this time. It stayed, and while it was there, I noticed a sound. Very faint, like a low hum, but not mechanical. More like pressure in your ears when you're going up a hill. It lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then the light vanished. The sound stopped with it. I didn't go back to sleep after that. That morning, I checked the time again. 5:12. Same as the first day I noticed it. I started keeping track after that, writing down when it happened, what I saw, anything different. There was a pattern, but I couldn't fully pin it down. Some mornings it didn't show up at all. Other mornings it appeared twice. Once on the wall, once on the ceiling. Always that same slow movement. Always that same stop. Then one morning, it did something different. It didn't move at all. I woke up and it was already there, low on the wall just above the floor. Not moving, just sitting there. I watched it for maybe 10 seconds before I even realized what was off. It wasn't sweeping. It was fixed. The shimmer was stronger too, like the air was bending more than before. I sat up slowly. The moment I did, the light shifted. Not smoothly like before, just a quick adjustment like it snapped slightly to the side. Then it started moving again, downward. Except there was nowhere left to go. It reached the floor and stayed there, for longer than usual. Then it faded. I got up right after and checked everything. The wall, the floor, the window. Nothing looked different. But when I looked at my shoes, something felt off. I couldn't place it at first. Then I realized they were slightly turned. Not moved far, just angled differently than how I'd left them. I hadn't touched them since the night before. I started closing my door after that. Didn't change anything. The light still came, still moved the same way, still stopped in the same place. I even tried sleeping in the living room one night. Nothing happened. No light. Next night, back in the bedroom, it was there again. Same time, same movement. I stopped trying to explain it. I just started watching it, counting seconds, noting where it stopped, trying to see if it reacted to anything else. It never did, except once. A few weeks after it started, I woke up later than usual. The room was already dim with early morning light. And there it was, but it wasn't on the wall. It was across the bed, a thin band of light stretching over the blanket right across where my legs were. It wasn't moving, just sitting there. I didn't move, didn't even breathe properly. After a few seconds, it started to slide, slowly, up the bed, toward my chest. I stayed completely still. It passed over my legs. Same thing as before, no feeling, but that strange blur, like my body wasn't quite visible while it was there. When it reached my stomach, it stopped, held there, then moved again, up to my chest, and stopped. The hum came back, stronger this time. Not loud, but I could feel it more than hear it. Then, just like every other time, it disappeared. I sat there for a long time after that, eventually got up, went to work, did everything like normal. That was 3 weeks ago, it hasn't happened since. But I still wake up around 5:10 most mornings, just lying there, waiting to see if the wall lights up again.